some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh, but I don't wanna miss you, baby. So I stand up and speak just my mind. Oh. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're chilling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh.
Welcome to the April 3rd, 2025 Planning Commission hearing. I will call the hearing to order at 1:02 p.m. Ms. Carmen, can we please have roll call?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. I'll begin with Chair Wardlow.
Here.
Vice Chair Boss.
Present.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Here.
Commissioner Bauke.
Here.
Commissioner DeLucia.
Here.
And Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to preliminary matters, requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or ex-agenda items. Ms. Arciniega, do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. No, we do not.
Thank you. And do we have any announcements or appeals?
We do not. Thanks.
Thank you. We are now on to item C, review, consideration, and action on the following draft Planning Commission minutes for March 13th, 2025 Planning Commission minutes and March 20th, 2025 Planning Commission minutes. Are there any Planning Commissioner comments on the minutes?
I'll move the minutes.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Yes, on the March 20th meeting for the item on Milpas, the motion, which was made by Commissioner Wiscombe and seconded by me, on item number 3 of that, we would like to change the phrasing, consider reducing the girth of the tower rather than the mass of the tower, to be more specific on what we were heading toward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we reflect that? Thank you. Any other Commissioner comments?
What word did he use? I didn't hear the word.
Girth.
Okay.
Girth.
Okay, thank you. And may I, are there any public speakers that would like to make comments on any of the minutes today? Great. If no comments, can I please have a motion for the March 13th and March 20th Planning Commission minutes?
I'll move the minutes
I'll second.
with that change in wording.
Thank you. Ms. Carmen, may we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. I'll begin with Commissioner Bauke.
Yes.
Commissioner DeLucia.
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson. Commissioner Barnwell.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Boss.
Yes.
And Chair Wardlow.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, and that takes us to item D, comments from members of the public pertaining to items that are not on today's agenda. Due to time constraints, each person is limited to 2 minutes. Ms. Carmen, do we have anyone in person or remote that would like to give public comment for items not on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. At this time, I do not have any speaker slips for general public comment. I would like to confirm that we are opening for Sheila after Sheila. Okay, so I don't have any speaker slips for general public comment on things not on this agenda. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on anything like that, they can fill out a speaker slip at this time, although I'm not seeing any movement. So I'll move to online participants, and we do currently have 2 participants online. If either of them would like to speak on general public comment, they can raise their hand at this time. And I'm not seeing any raised hands. We did not receive any written correspondence, and I'll give it back to you.
Wonderful. We are now on to item E, which is a ceremonial item that is special to all of us today, the recognition of Sheila Lodge. We as the Planning Commission and the whole city of Santa Barbara want to recognize and thank Sheila Lodge for her tremendous public service to the Santa Barbara community spanning over several decades. Sheila is a true visionary and foundational leader that is responsible for so much of what we all love and hold dear about Santa Barbara. I will now turn it over to Commissioner Wiscombe, who will read a resolution commemorating Sheila Lodge's significant service to our community. Commissioner Wiscombe, the floor is yours.
Okay. Sheila hasn't heard any of this, so usually she likes to proofread her resolutions, but I wasn't going to allow her to do that. So this is something we do at Planning Commission when someone leaves the commission. We do a resolution. So City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission resolution, retirement of Commissioner Sheila Lodge from the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission, dated April 3rd, 2025. Commissioner Sheila Lodge, after many years of service to our city as council member, first woman, and longest-serving mayor, planning commissioner, has sadly left the commission after 16 years of continuous service. The project requires the following approvals. 1, a modification of the Planning Commission membership. 2, subdivision of Sheila Lodge from the Planning Commission membership. And 3, conversion permit to convert Commissioner Lodge's Planning Commission seat to one occupied by Benjamin Peterson. Staff laments the loss of Commissioner Lodge, who made significant contributions to our meetings. Motion, approve the modification, subdivision, and conversion permit, make the findings, and subject to the conditions of approval outlined in the staff report as follows. Whereas Commissioner Lodge's long list of accomplishments include wife, mother of 4 daughters, author, architect in training, painter, photographer, amateur geologist, docent, gardener, and tireless advocate for keeping Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara. If Santa Barbara had a Mount Rushmore, Sheila would be on it. Sheila has been dealing with land use issues since being appointed to the Planning Commission in 1973. As a nonagenarian, Sheila has welcomed Queen Elizabeth to our city, presided over the dedication of our desalination plant, oversaw the removal of the last traffic light on Highway 101 between Mexico and San Francisco, negotiated Paseo Nuevo development, and authored portions of the city's general plan update. Although busy and dedicated to our city, Sheila found time to travel the whole length, 750 miles, of the San Andreas Fault, mostly in her car by herself. Whereas in addition to her public service, Sheila took a part-time job as an architect in training and designed the home where she lives today. It was built in 1971, and it's now designated a structure of merit. Her training in architecture apparently gave her incentive to critique architect Brian Cornell's work. In one case, he had a project before the commission with a tower element. Commissioner Lodge asked him to make the tower taller, so shockingly contrary to her normal distaste for lofty building heights. After Commission's review of the Tri-County Produce Project, she emailed Brian saying, and I quote, "I know you can do lovely Spanish colonial revival buildings. I remain perplexed by your insistence on a design so contrary to this city's heritage," unquote. Later, he modified the design. She thanked him in an email, and Brian wrote the team, "She likes it." Whereas Sheila also took on Caltrans for 20 years to fight against an elevated freeway through Santa Barbara. Eventually, Caltrans relented, and the surface freeway was designed with major city streets passing under. Architect and former Historic Landmarks Commissioner Bill Mahan oversaw a committee for Caltrans work. He saw a large red X on a building at 316 State Street, and Caltrans engineer explained that the building needed to be demolished to keep the road straight. Bill explained it was a structure of merit. Since the curve in the road required council approval, the engineer made a presentation to council. After the presentation, Councilmember Lodge asked him, "What is wrong with bending State Street a little?" He replied that it wouldn't be a straight line. Councilmember Lodge smiled down at him and questioned, "Well, you don't like curves?" Welcome to Sheila's Curve on State Street. Whereas Sheila was one of the authors of our average unit size density program approved by council in 2013 and still used today. Tongue-in-cheek, some referred to our AUD program as the Analyzed Until Discouraged program. Whereas Sheila's fellow commissioners all know that some of her favorite phrases are affordable by design, jobs housing imbalance, and builder's remedy. Whereas as an avid gardener, she often took out her frustrations by naming weeds after adversaries and then ripping them out of the ground with satisfaction. Whereas in her book, Santa Barbara, An Uncommon Place, American Town, she quotes from a newspaper article, and I quote, "The old landmarks and most charming characteristics of Santa Barbara are disappearing before the march of improvement. And though our practical people cannot move mountains, nor change the scenes, nor spoil the climate, They are doing all they can to despoil the quaint beauty of the place and make it just a commonplace American town. To her surprise, it was published in the Santa Barbara Daily Press on January 2nd, 1874. Whereas Commissioner Lodge answered it differently at the end of her book, Santa Barbara not only has a sense of place, it has a sense of community. That is part of its magic. I urge all who care about Santa Barbara to be part of it. Get involved and stay involved. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Commissioner Lodge, 1, did get involved and has stayed involved with caring for our city for more than 50 years. 2, has set the bar very high for protecting what makes Santa Barbara so special. 3, has inspired many in our community to stay involved in keeping Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara. 4, is highly appreciated by commissioners for years of institutional knowledge and imparting her wisdom to all of us. And 5, will be sorely missed by all, PC commissioners, staff, applicants, and public speakers alike, due to her incredibly strong love of her community. This motion was passed and adopted unanimously with appreciation, but very reluctantly, on the 3rd day of April 2025. And it is certified, I hereby certify this resolution correctly reflects the action taken by the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission at its meeting of the above date, signed by Jasper Carmen, Commission Secretary, on April 3rd, 2025. And please be advised, this action of the Planning Commission cannot be appealed to City Council within 10 calendar days after the date the action was taken by the Planning Commission. We have a That's your copy, and I could just leave this up here. This is for you from the commission. With the card. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Arciniega, who has a few words, so.
Just one more thing to add, and then we'd love to hear from you. I also just wanted to thank you on behalf of the Community Development Department for your service. We will be dedicating a tree to Sheila Lodge, including a plaque from Santa Barbara Beautiful with your name, so that all can see and remember your contributions to this community. Thank you again for all your work.
Oh, thank you. And the tree can join the one that was planted in honor of my husband. Goodness. Thank you. Oh, well, as you can see, I'm overwhelmed. In thinking about this day, I suddenly realized that I really did have a big impact, and from totally different directions in my first session on the Planning Commission, which was from 1973 to 1975, to my last one, and in a way it may seem contrary to my efforts to keep Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara. In 1973, a new, more environmentally conscious city council was elected. And they had a study done, a groundbreaking study on the impacts of growth. And the impacts of growth concluded that there were no advantages, and there were actually disadvantages to growth. The city council turned the study over to the Planning Commission and asked the commission to determine what would be an optimum population level for the city of Santa Barbara, a population goal. Well, the Planning Commission recommended 85,000 population, and the population at the time was 72,000. But the city was starting to feel congested. There were apartment buildings appearing that looked as if they belonged in the San Fernando Valley, not here. And And I'm wanting to be where the final decision would be made. I ran for city council the first time. I was elected, and the council adopted the 85,000 population goal. At that time, we didn't, it's often referred to as a rezoning. It wasn't a rezoning. We just changed the definition of what multiple housing units could be built, of how many per lot. And we lowered it from 40 to 12 and a half. Well, we realized soon that that was not providing the kind of housing we wanted. Developers were building large luxury units. And so it got changed to bedrooms per acre, and that didn't work either, because developers then started building very large studios that could later be divided up into, so that there were bedrooms. So then, I served on my term as mayor ended in 1993, and in 2008, the city council began a new general plan update. And it was going in a direction which I didn't think was good for the city. So I ended up getting reappointed to the Planning Commission, and then served from 2008 to 2024. And as a planning commissioner, the second time around, I was the one who suggested that the city change, and it was largely because it was partly a challenge to the development community, because during the general plan update process, the developers and architects and so on kept saying, if we just up the density, they could build housing that would be middle income affordable. And so I drew this map, and it became the first one. It included La Cumbre Plaza, which is on your agenda today. And it ultimately was adopted. I propose going back to the 40 units per acre. Council upped it to 62, which is an unheard of density anywhere in the Tri-Counties. I don't know where you'd go to find it. And it did result in the construction of more apartments in any event, which were needed. Anyhow, it just, to me, seemed, I went from one extreme to the other. But always with the goal of keeping Santa Barbara special, of very careful planning to keep it the kind of community it is that we all love. So thank you again.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for your comments and your clearly demonstrated commitment to thoughtful public policy. We all appreciate and thank you for your significant leadership in making Santa Barbara the beautiful place that we are all so grateful to call home. And thank you very much to Commissioner Wiscombe for her very thoughtful, comprehensive, and highly accurate resolution. With that, I will open it up to public comment for members of the public who would like to make comments in recognition of Sheila Lodge, and then we will go to commissioner comments after that. Ms. Carmen, do we have anyone in the public or remote that would like to give public comment today?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. At this time, I do have one public speaker slip. It's for Jordy Scully. If you would like to come up to the podium. Are we doing 2 minutes?
3 minutes.
You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if anyone else would like to speak, you can fill out a speaker slip and bring it up to me, and come on up after.
Thank you, commissioners. On behalf of Senator Monique Limon, I just wanted to congratulate Sheila Lodge on, sorry, you're behind me, but on your decades of commitment to the city of Santa Barbara. It is apparent how much you love the city, just based on all of the things you've done as a mayor, in several other roles, and as a commissioner. I just want to congratulate you and provide you with this senatorial certificate on behalf of Senator Lamont. Also, I just want to add, Commissioner Peterson, my colleague, was very sad he could not be here today and reminded me to come at least 5 times. So he's sorry he couldn't be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't currently have any other speaker slips to speak on Sheila. I'll move to online participants. It seems we do have one hand raised for Steve Johnson, so I'm going to allow you to speak. You will have 3 minutes to speak about Sheila.
I endorse the resolution.
Thank you. And with that, I will give it back to you, Chair Wardlow.
Thank you all for being here today to celebrate Sheila Lodge, and thank you, Sheila, for all of your amazing work and legacy in our community. I will now close public comment on this item, but I would like to turn it over to my fellow commissioners, as I believe a number of them would also like to provide some comments in recognition of Sheila. Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Sheila, I just wanted to let you know that I am up here in this chair because of you. Because in 1991, when you were the great poobah of the whole South Coast, I tried twice to get on to a city commission and had failed both times. So I went to see you personally. By the way, this is over 30 years ago, which I know neither of us want to know those numbers. And I went to see you and I said, so is this whole thing fixed? I mean, how do you get on these commissions? Is it working? You said, oh, no, it's not. You've got to try again. And I said, well, what am I doing wrong? And you asked me, what did I do? And I said, I was a land consultant and a real estate appraiser. And you said, well, why don't you try out for the Rental Housing Mediation Task Force? Which I did. And I was on it for 8 years, and that started me. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell. We'll now go to Vice Chair Boss.
So Sheila, while we only served on Planning Commission together for a couple of years, I've long admired your public comments on many subjects. You've never wasted an opportunity to share a lesson or an important message, and I want to especially thank you for your dedication to preserving our community's environmental resources. When the Board of Supervisors honored you a few weeks ago, you used, it happened to be on the same day as an appeal related to an oil pipeline permit. So after you were given your commendations from the board and the public, you used your platform to say, don't enable Sable. You're always giving that message, and I really appreciate that. There's a Greek proverb that says something along the lines of, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. And while you're a young woman, you have planted many trees whose shade will be enjoyed by many future generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Boss. We'll now go to Commissioner DeLuccio.
If I could, I would abstain from the vote of this resolution, but I know it's going to move forward, and I just want to thank you so much. When I was appointed to this commission a couple of years back, the first person I contacted was Ms. Lodge, and we actually met for coffee, and of course she gave me her book. She signed her book, and I gave her a box of candy. And that's been our little running joke since. I don't know if it's a joke. She actually commented about the candy that I gave her, so I got it from See's Candy, and the manager over there claims to know what kind of candy she likes. So then I went back and I gave her a second box of candy, and she commented since. So today I've given you a third box of candy, and please keep in touch, an excuse to keep in touch, and let me know what you think of the candy. But thank you so much for all you've done and for mentoring me over the last couple of years, and I know our friendship will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. Now we will hear from Commissioner Wiscombe again.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I was moved by what Commissioner Barnwell said, because I remember I was on the Parks and Recreation Commission for 7+ years, and then one day I get a call at 7 o'clock in the morning, an unheard of time for Sheila to call anyone. She's no, don't talk to me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what on earth is wrong? And she says, you need to apply for the Planning Commission. You need to apply for the Planning Commission. So you are definitely the reason why I'm here, and I've been here 8+ years now, and you are my mentor and my friend, and I'm going to miss you. But we will stay in touch, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. And now we'll hear from Commissioner Bauke.
Madam Chair, thank you, Sheila, for your service. I think the community as a whole is much better off with all the time and effort you've placed in the planning world. I remember when I moved to Santa Barbara, you were the mayor, and you were definitely the voice of reason at the time. And I've seen this community go through a whole lot of different iterations during that time period, and you were sort of the steady force, and I do really appreciate that. So thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you to all of my fellow commissioners, and I echo their sentiment. Thank you so much, Sheila, for your leadership in this community. And I, too, have a similar story to everyone else of joining the Planning Commission and then meeting with Sheila as one of my first meetings. And I remember we met for almost like 2.5 hours on Zoom, and I felt so welcomed, and I felt really, really fortunate to get this much time with like the legendary Sheila Lodge to walk me through all of the different dynamics of the Planning Commission, housing policy, and it was just really exciting for me as a new commissioner that you spent that much time with me. So I want to thank you for your efforts to kind of make me feel welcome, and then I know that you've been a massive inspiration to so many other younger leaders in the community and getting folks wanting to be involved in the civic process. So thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for making Santa Barbara so beautiful, and we are all very grateful for all of your legacy and efforts in our community. So with that, thank you, Sheila. So with that, we will now move on to item 3, concept review of 3845 State Street, La Cumbre South Homes.
Just because I don't sit up there anymore, don't think I've lost interest. I'm staying for this item.
Wonderful. We wouldn't expect anything less. All right, well, this was a fun beginning of our meeting, so thank you everybody for joining us today. We will now get back to business and we will have Patsy Price, our contract planner, who is here with us today to provide a staff presentation. Ms. Price, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Wardlaw, members of the Commission. We are here today for concept review of the proposed redevelopment of the southern portion of La Cumbre Plaza Shopping Center. My presentation will focus on staff's analysis of pre-application materials submitted by the applicant and applicable zoning and general plan regulations. The applicant team's presentation will focus more specifically on the project details and the site design. The pre-application project for average unit size density projects like this is designed with the intent that staff, ABR, and the Planning Commission each review the same set of materials. You'll see in the applicant's presentation that it will include some additional details and begin to respond to some of the comments that they have received from staff and the ABR. You're certainly welcome to comment on these items, but please know that staff and the ABR have not reviewed those materials. So the project site is located within La Cumbre Plaza Shopping Center, which is a 31-acre site composed of 8 parcels. It's in the Upper State Street area. In the early 2000s, the city undertook a study of the Upper State Street area focused on traffic, circulation, and urban design issues. This culminated in the adoption of the Upper State Street Design Guidelines, which are intended to provide direction to property owners on future improvements and development in the Upper State Street area. I'll discuss this in more detail later in my presentation. Also, as Ms. Lodge noted, the property is subject to the average unit size density program, which I'll also discuss in just a moment. Here's a map of the average unit size density program, and the La Cumbre Plaza is mostly highlighted in the red hatching, which identifies it as an area for the highest densities under the average unit size density program. So the project site itself is located at 3845 State Street, which is a 9.45 acre site where the former Sears building and Sears Auto Center is located. Under the average unit size density incentive program, a portion of the site is designated for commercial high density and is within the priority housing overlay. This allows densities up to 63 units per acre. The portion of the site that is within 250 feet of Highway 101 has a slightly lower density designation. It's commercial medium high density, which allows densities up to 27 units per acre. So the purpose of this review is, the average unit size density program is designed with a pre-application review process. And in instances where the project involves rental housing, proposed under this program in the priority housing overlay on a lot that is larger than 15,000 square feet and does not require another discretionary approval by the Planning Commission, the process calls for a pre-application review by the Planning Commission prior to submittal of the formal planning application. So that is why we are here today. The purpose of the review is for the Commission to provide comments and recommendations by majority vote on the proposed design and improvement of the project and the project's consistency with the city's general plan. So getting into the details of the project. The proposed project is a 443-unit residential rental project. It includes 10% moderate income units per the city's inclusionary housing requirement for AUD projects. It also includes open yard areas and amenities for residents and a proposed multi-use path along Arroyo Burro Creek, which extends along the eastern side of the property. Since the application, the initial pre-application was submitted, the applicant has determined that the project site is part of a larger legal lot and intends to submit a lot split along with the formal application for design review to separate the project site from the remainder of the legal lot. That lot split would go to the staff hearing officer for approval. Getting into zoning consistency, as I said, the inclusionary program requires 10% of units in a rental project of 10 units or more to be affordable in the moderate income level. For this project, that would be 44.3 units. The applicant has proposed 44 moderate income units as part of the project, and they would be required to pay an in lieu fee for the fractional 0.3 units. There was not enough detail included in the conceptual plans for the project for staff to analyze consistency with all of the zoning standards like height, setback, et cetera. But here you can see the standards that will apply to this project. And the applicant is not requesting any variances or modifications and has indicated an intent to comply with all the standards. Getting into general plan consistency, I've included a number of general plan policies here from summarizing policies from the land use, circulation, housing, and environmental resources element. There's a comprehensive list of applicable policies in Exhibit D of the staff report. These policies include identifying the La Cumbre Plaza 5 Points area as for the highest densities for residential growth in the city, encouraging and facilitating affordable rental housing, encouraging a mix of land uses with easy access to groceries, drugstores, services, recreation, and public space, and improving traffic flow in conjunction with improved access for pedestrians, bicycles, public and private transit. Digging into some specific policies, the land use element includes policy LG15, the Sustainable Neighborhood Planning Policy, which provides opportunities, which calls for providing opportunities for accessibility and healthy living while reducing the community's carbon footprint. An implementation action under this policy called for preparing an initial framework for the future a future La Cumbre Plaza specific plan, anticipating redevelopment of the shopping center as a mixed-use commercial and residential village. This implementation action specifically identified considering a transit center, pedestrian connections, east-west vehicle circulation connections, parking structures as opposed to surface parking, and open space in public parks. As you know, a specific plan has not been prepared for the site. However, the considerations noted in this policy are still applicable to redevelopment of this site. The 2023 to 2031 housing element also identifies, includes a policy related to the La Cumbre Plaza planning area, HE2, and states that in redevelopment of the site, considerations include effects on Arroyo Burro Creek, provisions of new public open space, multimodal circulation improvements, impacts to nearby schools, new affordable housing, and increased height limits. With the formal application, the applicant will be required to demonstrate how redevelopment of the site fits with and connects with the larger La Cumbre Plaza, both currently and in anticipation of future redevelopment of the rest of the site. This would include addressing transit facilities and pedestrian connections, vehicle circulation within the site and the surrounding area, and the effects on the creek, and adequate open space to serve the needs of residents. These issue areas will also be considered in environmental review for the project. The environmental resources element includes numerous policies related to creek protection. I've included a couple here. With each of these policies, there are implementation actions related to creek setbacks, protection of riparian and scenic resources, trails along creeks, and restoration and naturalization of creeks. Again, the full list of applicable policies and implementation items is included in Exhibit D of your staff report. The circulation element calls for emphasizing high-quality infrastructure, including enhanced pedestrian and bicycle facilities and strong connections to transit. Staff is working closely with the applicant to ensure there are safe and accessible pedestrian and bicycle facilities surrounding and within the development. As the project details are finalized, staff will also evaluate the effect it would have on traffic at city-identified impacted intersections. The applicant is proposing a path along Arroyo Burro Creek on the east side of the property. In the plan set, there are two versions of this path. Sheet A17 shows a walking path with bicycles sharing the drive aisle adjacent to that walking path. And sheet A17.1 includes a wider multi-use path where the path would serve both pedestrians and bicycles and be separated from the drive aisle. Staff supports keeping bicycles separate from the vehicle drive aisle and will continue to work with the applicant to refine the circulation design for this and the rest of the site. Transportation planner Jessica Grant is also here to address specific questions you may have related to transportation and circulation. Getting into project design considerations, as I said earlier, the site is within the Upper State Street design guidelines, which provide direction on design and infrastructure considerations for this area. I've included a couple graphics here from the guidelines. This graphic shows urban design considerations, and you can see in the project area, it calls for providing viewing locations to the mountains within the redevelopment. Here's the transportation improvements graphic from the guidelines, and it calls for an off-street pedestrian path along the creek that would ultimately connect and extend to the north, connecting to State Street and to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure north of the project site. On March 3rd, ABR conducted their conceptual review of the preliminary application. Their comments included recommending to the applicant to study the massing of the continuous 4-story perimeter of the site. They also recommended revising the scale of the arches on the Calle Real frontage, simplifying fenestration and emphasizing more horizontal elements with vertical features at the building endpoints. They suggested looking to the Santa Barbara Courthouse as an example of a large building that fits with Santa Barbara style. They asked the applicant to further develop landscape design and increase the porosity of the buildings to connect to the landscape, and asked that the applicant provide additional detail with the formal application on the elevation facing Arroyo Burro Creek. The minutes from that ABR meeting with the rest of their comments is also included in your staff report. So again, the purpose of this Planning Commission concept review is for you to provide comments and recommendations by majority vote on the proposed design and improvement of the project and the project's consistency with the city's general plan. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Price. We will now hear from the applicant team. If you will please state your full name and your relationship to the project for the record. The applicant has requested additional time for their presentation, which we have granted, so you will have 20 minutes to present. Ms. Carmen, will you please start the timer after they have announced themselves?
Mark. Good afternoon, Chair Wardlow and members of the commission. I'm Dave Eady, the applicant. Got our team today to show you a lot of information, and just to start out, to echo what Patsy said, our objective here is to produce a plan that is consistent both with the general plan policies and the zoning ordinance, and with all dispatch, trying to move the project forward as quickly as possible, utilizing the SB 330 provisions. You're going to hear a lot of good input here based on some responses we got from the ABR, and we look forward to hearing your comments. In order, and perhaps even tag team, we'll have RC Alley, Scott Baker first, our landscape architect. He'll kick it off, and RC Alley with he is the architect with AO Architects. And as far as questions and answers, I'm available. These two guys are available, and our civil engineer, Jeremy Saltz with Stantec, is available. So I look forward to hearing your comments, and I'll let the rest of these guys start. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Scott Baker, I'm the founding principal of Realm Landscape Architects and Urban Design. As Dave mentioned, RC and I are going to tag team a little bit. I'm going to just lead off with some initial kind of context slides just to sort of understand the site. And some of this is born out of our initial presentation to the ABR and some of the questions that were raised. I think just important to understand with our project at the south end there, how this is sitting into the broader context. Obviously, State Street is this remarkable street that is developing an additional density that's happening along there. We look at our proposal really as the bookend of La Cumbre Plaza at the south end, and actually to give a stronger edge, create some of that permeability that doesn't exist now, and actually allow more access from the south coming off of Calle Real. I think importantly with this slide, one of the things that was raised was, why are we pushing buildings out to La Cumbre? And I think we're wanting to sort of at least posit the idea of creating a better gateway edge along La Cumbre as we come in. Right now, as you likely know, it's a number of gas stations. There's a pet vet location there. Smaller scale, it's inevitable to roll over in time and become something else. We look at what we're starting to do is really setting up a gateway element to State Street in particular, but using La Cumbre in that regard. And then as we zoom in, just a couple of other considerations before RC talks about architecture. Notably, the pink slice through the site is the fault easement, which limits where we can build. It essentially bifurcates the site into a north half and a south half. With that, there's also the sort of setback associated with the freeway along the south edge as well. We'll talk a lot about the Arroyo Burro Creek and how that becomes a new important feature of the site. And I think just in general, thinking about grade relationships of being at 205 at La Cumbre and Calle Real and getting down to the existing La Cumbre Plaza, which is at elevation 190, and how we're beginning to try to reconcile all of those elements with the site. And RC, you want to jump in here because you're going to pick up. But I think a couple of key urban design moves that we wanted to make is, one, create that accessibility and that micro-mobility path along Arroyo Burro Creek and allow the public in through at that point and be the catalytic piece to a future connection. Establish a new project entry right at the intersection of La Cumbre and Calle Real and really use that as part of setting up that approach up La Cumbre to State Street. And then that northern drive, the La Cumbre Plaza entry, formalizing that with the position of our north building, as we'll talk about, that remains an important gateway to the existing mall and wanting to reinforce that with additional sidewalks and things like that. And we'll talk about that in more detail as we go. RC, you want to pick up?
Good afternoon, R.C. Alley with AO. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Scott. So we looked a lot at the site. It's a very, very complicated site, as Scott mentioned, with the fault zone, the different grade planes, and this really illustrates, this and the previous exhibit really illustrates some of the challenges we had. I'll show you the site plan in a minute, but this really is an overlay of how our building starts to interface with the site, with the grades, with Calle Real, the entry along La Cumbre, and it really, again, trying to nestle into the existing topography and the existing conditions of the site. So this is our site plan. Basically, it consists of 3 separate buildings: residential building facing La Cumbre, a recreation leasing building in the heart of the project that's adjacent to our commons, and the residential building that's on the southern end of the project. Basically, what we proposed is a wrap-type building for the larger building, parking structures that front La Cumbre and the 101. We also have limited density there, as was discussed previously. You can see the project is organized around 3 courtyards. Basically, each courtyard has the units that face inward. Again, this is a wrap-type project. If you haven't seen a wrap-type project, the way those work, it's an above-grade structure, parking structure. And if you live on the 4th floor, you generally park and you drive and you park on the 4th floor, and you enter through a corridor system into your dwelling unit. It's a very great living experience. It's been very well proven in California, and it works great. Oops. Sorry about that. You can see the lower grades. The tan area represents where we've stepped the building down. Because we do have, again, varied grades, lower grades specifically along the creek, and the Sears building itself has an upper tier and a lower tier. So we really, again, nestled the project to work within the site. Basically, all of our utilitarian functions are located within the parking structures, the trash, elevators, all of those things. Along the Calle Real edge, basically we have no dwelling units that face the freeway at all. They face inward towards the courtyards, and that's for a bunch of reasons. One is the air quality standards, but also just really enhances the living experience, because looking out on a freeway is not great. Along Arroyo Burro Creek, it's a much quieter edge, and I'll talk to you about the architecture on that in a minute. The northern edge of the building fronts the commons, which is what we call the large area in the center of the project. There is a ceremonial entrance between the 2 buildings that face La Cumbre. There's a driveway and parking field, and then a turnabout there that's about halfway into the site. This location, right about where the courtyard is. And then from that down is again, our open recreation area with a pool and all of our amenities, which Scott will talk about in a few minutes. On the northern end of the project, again, is our smaller building, which does front La Cumbre and defines the scale of the project in general. Our leasing office, again, is located in the heart of the project. It's about 10,000 square feet. It's a large community building. It's part of the commons as well, and it's put there by intent. These are some sections that really kind of show how the building steps down and follows the topography of the site. Architecture. We met with ABR on March the 3rd of this year. They did make some great suggestions, and I'm glad that staff showed those to you before. And I think we really heard them, and we've responded to them. I'm looking forward to showing you what we've done. We have simplified the buildings. They are more horizontally massed. And again, a very more simpler architecture. Some of the statements I heard were bold, simple, and horizontal. We were encouraged to revisit some of the large arch elements, which we've done. And the really great thing is, when we got into it, there was really a discussion about, it is a four-sided project. There's not a back to this project at all. And I'm going to talk about all the four edges as well. This is a high-level aerial view looking along from La Cumbre, looking south. This is a high-level vision of the project looking north from Calle Real. And this, I'm going to try to go quickly because of our time limits here. Again, you can see the four different edges, all influenced by very different parameters. I'll start by, basically along South La Cumbre, again, more of a ceremonial entrance to the project. The freeway edge is very interesting, very highly visible, but again, we have restrictions to use, and we really don't want units to face there, so we've been very sensitive as to how to treat that edge of the project. We believe it's arguably one of the gateways to the city as well, so we've been very, very cognizant of how it looks. We've got the La Cumbre edge, which is highly visible from La Cumbre Plaza, and it fronts the Commons. And then again, the Arroyo Creek edge. We'll go through these quickly. Detail of the La Cumbre Road edge. You can see very traditional Santa Barbara building. And that's really a view of the entrance, which is bookended by both of the buildings. On the upper left and the lower right, two different views of that edge from La Cumbre. So this is interesting. These are some of our imagery for the freeway edge. And there was a lot of discussion at the ABR about this. The upper image is a photo that I took in the gallery or in the meeting room that we met. And it was, to me, a very good example of how to break down a building into smaller components. And we've taken this to heart, and we have done that. You can see the elevation. It's really broken into four very distinct components. We've tried to be very sensitive. It's simplified over what it had been before with large arches. And we think that it's very sympathetic to that edge. I'm just going to keep going here. There's the La Cumbre. This is the entrance to the project. When you drive down, you can see again the architecture of the larger building, the pedestrian entrance on the upper right and the upper left and lower right. This is the neighborhood edge, which faces Arroyo Burro Creek. And it's very different architecturally. It has a much smaller scale, a much more defined scale, because we think it's going to interface very differently with that edge of the project, with the pedestrian walkway and the bicycle path. And there's a few images of that as well.
Okay, so then pivoting to landscape, and it was raised in that ABR hearing about wanting to see a bit more detail, a bit more refinement, and so we appreciate the opportunity to dig into kind of where we are with that. And I think, our goal is always to deliver something that is of the place and a quality and a character that belongs, so that the idea of this landscape solution not being able to be dropped down in another city, for example, that it wanted to sort of speak to Santa Barbara. And so some of the images that we're looking at and sort of this notion of landscape and sort of timeless materials and a warmth and a beauty, but sort of a look forward, not that it always has to necessarily be red tile or red brick, but thinking about how something could actually still be sophisticated and very much at home here in Santa Barbara. And I think as we talk about the amenities that would be included in the plan, I'm beginning to think about how the idea of outdoor living and outdoor recreation for residents and their guests, things like fire pits, things like great little corners under trees to kind of hang out with friends and gather, even including some recreation facilities like sand volleyball in that central commons area. But all sort of being kind of tied to that vernacular that we're establishing. We've seen the overall plan, so I'm going to just keep going. I think first and foremost, wanted to talk about sort of access and permeability, and then talk about each of those four edges specifically. As was mentioned, creating more opportunities for micromobility, so leveraging the Arroyo Burro Creek as a sort of future connector within the city. And so with that, proposing a 12-foot multi-use path that's separated from the access drive and fire access and all of that, but allowing for that multi-use path that would handle both pedestrians and bikes alike. Equally, Calle Real, similar situation, a 10-foot multi-use path separated from traffic through landscape and then buffered from the building through a deep landscape setback, but getting that connectivity across Calle Real, which is otherwise not a very favorable stretch of road right now, being largely vehicular dedicated. And then from La Cumbre, multiple sort of access points for pedestrians to move in through the project coming off of that street. And again, as you're all aware right now, it's a surface parking lot, which doesn't necessarily lend itself to pedestrians or bikes. So our ambition here is obviously to make this end of the site much more permeable. And so a little bit more granular detail, I want to just walk around each of the 4 edges, much like RC did. First, with La Cumbre, creating a good streetscape edge, parkway planting, an 8-foot sidewalk along that edge, a deep landscape setback. And again, as I said, I look at La Cumbre as being an important gateway street to bring you to State Street. A lot of emphasis has been put on State Street, so La Cumbre really needs to, in many ways, set the stage for that. And so how we create a good edge that supports pedestrians and a good tree-lined edge is really important to us. Similarly, Calle Real, I mentioned the 10-foot multi-use path that would be separated from traffic. Part of our challenge there, of course, is its freeway adjacency. So we're looking at having minimum typically 30 feet, if not greater, in terms of landscape setback from the curb. Within that 10-foot path would exist, and that still leaves us room to have layers of landscape that help with some of the air quality concerns that we have through sort of the right, appropriately chosen species. And then Arroyo Burro Creek, as we talked about, to the betterment of the project, we were able to have a good discussion with the fire department. Normally, the fire lane would have to be 26 or 27 feet wide. There was agreement that we could get away with, I don't mean to make that sound so slight, but to have a 20-foot drive. What that does is that allows us to grow that pedestrian and bike path, that multi-use path, to 12 feet. To still separate it from the access drive through landscape and actually expand the landscape zone from the existing fence. And so equally interesting to us as mobility is also continuing to expand the habitat along that corridor as well, because it's an important asset for the city. So that move with the drive really opens up the opportunity for us to create that connectivity. And we hope that it's catalytic to what might happen further to the north in the future and using the Arroyo Burro Creek as an important linkage. And then finally, while not a street edge, how we abut the existing La Cumbre Plaza Mall. I think one of the things we want to point out is that the area, there's this knuckle that happens where all the pedestrian circulation of the mall comes together. And so within the parcel of the project, we're actually creating a public space, a new plaza space that could have trees and seating and really a gathering space that becomes kind of a new terminus, if you want to look at it that way, for the circulation of the mall, and reconciling that movement as well as creating a gateway into the project from that end. And then the last piece is the drive that is on the north side of our project. It abuts the Habit Burger, it abuts one of the gas stations that I talked about. And what we're looking to do, both with the architecture, creating a gateway, but create a new 6-foot walk that would come in there and make it a more pedestrian-friendly experience. This remains an important access point to the mall, and we want to make sure that we reinforce that and create that access way. I'm keeping an eye on the time here, so I'm going to move quickly. I want to move just into the project in terms of some of its spaces as well. What we're talking about, sort of the commons, using that fault easement as our largest piece of open space. It's north of an acre, the amenity area, plus the entry drive in addition to that. Important to know that this is also fire access that needs to come through here. So there we do have a 26-foot fire lane that needs to move all the way through. But importantly, as an entry, we don't want it to sort of feel like a parking lot. We want to take a page out of a hospitality playbook here and make sure that this feels like a really well-treed, well-canopied sort of parking grove, if you will, with enhanced paving. Framing that entry with some pilasters, again, that start to create a sense of arrival and entry into the space. And then from there, moving into what we're calling the commons, which is the primary amenity space. And with that, having open lawn terraces, an amenity area with pool, spa, a lap pool as well, and then the volleyball down at the far end. And then linking all of that with this pedestrian paseo that moves from left to right in this plan, and also doubles as that fire lane access that I was speaking of. It drops down, as I mentioned before, from 205 down to 190 to meet the mall, and making that transition graceful, making sure that the fire lane and ADA can all comply along there. But moving guests and residents down through a sequence of spaces becomes quite important to us. And then looking at it in the other direction from the existing parking lot through our amenity pool, we're minimizing that sort of grade relationship between the parking and the pool, a slight rise. But I want to just point to the fire lane that needs to come down through there as well, and how we're accommodating that as really a pedestrian spine that links all of these spaces for the residents. And I'm now into the yellow time here, so I'll pick it up. I think the last couple of things I wanted to talk about are the courtyards. And you know, we've put dimensions on here, and the dimensions are important because the building is 45 feet. And so the narrowest courtyard, the one on the right, is still wider at its narrowest point than the building is tall. And that's really important because we want these courtyards to be well planted, well used, good sun exposure, and that's my time. So, section, and that's the plan. So I was very close, but anyways.
Thank you very much for this really comprehensive presentation, and it was very visually beautiful. I thought that was very helpful, so thank you. That takes us to comments from members of the public pertaining to this specific item. Ms. Carmen, do we have anyone in person or remote that would like to give public comment?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. At this time, I do have 2 speaker slips for public comment on this item. First, we will have Dennis Hamilton, followed by Ann Hubbard. And you will have 3 minutes to speak. And so, Dennis, if you want to come up to the podium, I'll get it started when you're up there.
Hello, my name is Dennis Hamilton, and I reside at 251 South Hope. What I found interesting with these 2 men is they never mentioned the housing authority or the 5-year-old building that's right next to the creek with beautiful oak trees and everything. That seems a little, they seem to be missing a little bit. Anyway, I've lived in Santa Barbara since 1966, and I've been a librarian at Santa Barbara Public Library. I've been a librarian at La Colina Junior High School. I've been a librarian at UCSB for 14 years, and I'm retired from UCSB. But the thing that I see is there's no mention of Hope Avenue, and also this is a huge number of apartments, and there's another one at the other end where Macy's is going to have huge number of apartments. I just wonder what's going to happen to La Cumbre Plaza, the shopping center. Maybe somebody could tell me. But getting back to my own self, I was a resident in Santa Barbara when Miss Lodge was mayor, and I've owned 3 houses in Santa Barbara, on Brenner Drive and Willow Glen Road and up on the Mesa, and I know there's need for more housing, but I wondered what moderate income, what does that mean? I'm in a low-income place. What is the estimate of moderate income? Would that make it affordable to low-income people then, or they wouldn't be able to apply for one of the studios? Now, currently, I live in a studio apartment, excuse me, which is on the first floor of the Housing Authority building, and I have a window a door and a little patio outside my room. But when the destruction and then the construction period, oh,
Thank you, sir.
is that my time's up? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next up, we will have Ann Hubbard, if you want to come up to the podium.
Good afternoon. Ann Hubbard, the Superintendent of Hope School District, and I will preface my comments with, I know a lot about local control accountability plans, the science of reading, and things like that. I know I'd be lying if I said even I have a surface level of understanding of how development works. So if my comments are not at the appropriate place, I apologize, but I figure every opportunity I have a chance to speak about the development impacting Hope School District, I will. If you don't know, Hope School District is what's called a community-funded district, which means that it's not a choice or a checkbox, but our district is funded not by per pupil funding, but based on property taxes. Again, not a choice, but designated by the state. So as we add students to our little district, which currently serves under 900 students, there's a great impact. We have 3 campuses, Vieja Valley, which is currently assigned to this area, Hope Elementary School and Monte Vista Elementary School. We're a desired district, we're a great performing district. We were just, one of our schools was just named California Distinguished School. However, when I look at these numbers, I have a lot of fear in my heart for what that's going to mean to the school district. I want to really thank Dave and Perry, who reached out right from the beginning, made an appointment, came in and sat down with us at the school district to say, hey, this is what we're doing. However, what my concern is with all the development happening within the little footprint of Hope School District, I've yet to really grasp how the school district will be supported. I understand about developer fees. That is a one-time fee, and it will not cover even a new building of 4 classrooms. So when we look at this, we had a housing study done. I've supplied it to Laura Caps's office, to Randy's office, to whoever wants it. It really shows the impact of the development within the footprint of Hope School District, and is showing that we'll have a need for about 28 additional classrooms, which is multi-millions of dollars. We own no other property than our 3 school campuses. In fact, I work in an office that is not part of the Hope School District. We lease from the County Office of Education. That's how limited we are in our property. So I just would love to see, as we go through with these projects, this one included, plans for how the developers can work with the school districts directly to support the impact that this will have on the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have any other speaker slips for in-person public comment, so I'm going to move on to virtual participation. I do have one hand raised at the time, so Steve Johnson, I'm going to allow you to speak. You should be able to talk.
Thank you for the opportunity. This project is not consistent with the general plan. The site is listed in the housing element suitable sites inventory. Its allocation calls for 131 moderate income units. The project only proposes 44. Housing element program HE-15 is applicable, and it states the city cannot approve development for this project unless findings are made. But simple arithmetic shows that such findings are impossible. The project cannot be approved as currently proposed. I'm astonished that this issue has not been discussed anywhere in a PRT, staff report, previous reviews at ABR. Nowhere, it's buried. The project must be revised to satisfy HE-15. The project could use state bonus density to double its density, thereby meeting the requirements. You would have to reduce parking requirements. That's readily available with state bonus density. And doubling the density requires no change to the proposed building envelope. I'm sure former Mayor Lodge will appreciate that you can double density within acceptable building envelopes. I suggest continuing this project until the issue can be adequately addressed by staff. I'm going to make this one other quick observation. The original suitable sites inventory done in 2022 had an allocation for this project for 104 low-income units. The final allocation was for some reason reduced to 0. An explanation as to why is beyond my 2 minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't currently have any other hands raised, but I will acknowledge that we received written correspondence from Steve Johnson, Dennis Hamilton, Susan Shields, and Paul Costales. And I'll give it back to you, Chair Wardlow.
Thank you. And I will now close public comment on this item. And we will now open it up to my fellow commissioners for questions. Who would like to go first? I have Commissioner Bauke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a whole lot of questions, but I'm going to probably do some and then stop and then come back and let the other commissioners start. But first off, I want to have staff walk us through so we understand very clearly the process that we're under. I understand that we're here to give comments. Our comments have to be provided in a motion by the group here at majority vote. That is then sent to the ABR, and ABR considers that, and the applicant considers that. According to your staff report, this project may never see the light of day at the Planning Commission again. So I want the public to understand that this is maybe this body's one and only time to actually say something about this project. Could you tell us at what particular circumstance could it actually come back to the commission? There's got to be some triggers. What are those triggers?
Chair Wardlow, or Commissioner Bauke through Chair Wardlow. So you're correct. The project, as proposed in the pre-application, only required design review by the ABR. As I mentioned in my presentation, they are also going to be including a tentative map for a lot split with their formal application. That will go to the staff hearing officer for approval. But under those provisions, that would be the review process for the project. The decision of the staff hearing officer can be appealed to the Planning Commission. There are also provisions in the municipal code for the Planning Commission to call up that decision or essentially appeal it to themselves. It's the same process as an appeal in that case. If the project were to require an EIR, there would also be an EIR hearing before the Planning Commission. Those are the instances when it could come to the Planning Commission again.
And at this point, there's no application, so there's no environmental determination by staff, so we don't know
Correct.
whether an EIR mitigated, would a mitigated ND come to the commission?
I'm going to
Chair
defer to
Wardlow.
council.
Commissioner Bauke, I'm not sure if it would. I think it would still stay with the staff hearing officer as part of that determination. I also do want to point out as part of the Housing Crisis Act that we would be limited to 5 hearings, as this is a housing development project, once the application is deemed complete. So we would also want to be cognizant of those public hearings.
Right, we've been there before on a couple other projects.
Correct.
The other question I had, I just want to confirm, this is an SB 330 project. They made an application, even though SB 330, the legislature adopted it with the idea we would have, objective design standards that we could apply, but the applicant chose to go to the discretionary method instead of through our objective design standards, which weren't adopted at the time in which they filed their application. We do have them now. I want to make sure from council that our standard review that we have, we can use them as basis for our comments if we so desire. Is that correct? I mean, as a standard review, we pretty much, I don't know any standard review other than the general plan policies, or, we're all pining here, but I want to clearly understand whether we could use them as sort of a litmus test, because they are sort of our minimum standards.
Chair Wardlow, Commissioner Bauke, this project has chosen to do the discretionary review process. So, I mean, you could look at the objective design standards, but those are intended to be comprehensively used. So if you choose one piece of design, it leads you to another path. So just kind of looking at them like, well, this is the craftsman style. And so that's where there's just a little bit a different.
Yeah, I understand that there is a particular section of the objective design standards called large sites, which this particular site in Lacumba Plaza, as somebody sat on that committee to develop it, was targeted at this specific location in the rest of Lacumba Plaza. And since we don't have a specific plan, I just want to make sure, because I'm going to go there, okay? I just want to make sure everybody understands. I think that's sort of our minimum standard to meet is what's in there, because that's, would be the city's default if they came through that door. So I do have a question as for the policies on parks. There was a lot of conversation in the Macy's project about public park requirements. Could you walk us through what the public park policies and requirements and Quimby fees and such, so we understand? Because I don't see any public parks in this application.
Yes, if Ms. Carmen could bring up the PowerPoint, I have the graphic from the Upper State Street guidelines. So as you may recall for the Macy's project, that green dot at the corner of State and Hope indicates an area where there was called for open space park and plaza and creek corridor improvements. So there was a particular emphasis for the Macy's site on a public park at that site. For this site, the plan calls for, or the guidelines call for off-street pedestrian trails as well as viewing locations, but doesn't have something specific related to parks. The project is required to comply with open yard standards as a residential project, and so as the applicant has proposed, there would be open yard areas that would be available to residents, but it wouldn't be a public park.
Do we have general plan policies that require?
We have.
Usually it's based on population.
We do not have specific general plan policies that call for a ratio of parks per population.
Okay, that's unusual, but okay. All right, I'll stop my comments at this point because I have tons others, but I think I'll defer to my fellow commissioners to ask some of the other questions that I expect them to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bauke. We'll now go to Commissioner DeLuccio.
I share your comments as well and concerns actually in regards to the process. So I'm going to ask some questions and maybe I'll ask some more later. As I always do, right?
Okay.
Can I ask the public speaker a question? The school, Hope School District, can I ask you a question, please? You're going to come up to the mic, please. It sounds like you guys conducted your own study.
We did,
Was
in
that for
June
just-
of 2024.
Was that just for this project or also the Macy's project?
Also the Macy's project, as well as other projects, including housing authority projects and some county pocket projects.
Okay, and you shared that with staff?
I haven't shared it with the commission. I'm happy to. I've shared it to many elected officials.
I'd like a copy of that, please.
Most definitely.
Okay.
As long as I get your email, I can
will give that
send
to
it
you.
right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that was my question. Also, in regards to the tentative track map, that would go, sounds like it would go to the hearing officer if it comes to that. So they actually, when it goes to the hearing officer, it's not for the whole project per se. They're not going to be looking at all the conditions, et cetera. They'll be looking at one particular issue of the project. Is that correct for approval?
They would be reviewing the project under the findings for a tentative map approval.
Which is not all the.
Which is not the entire project. So after the tentative map approval, then the design would be reviewed by ABR.
Okay, so the design will be reviewed by ABR, but who reviews the land use issues if it's not this body here? I mean, today, I did read the pre-application, which was, thank you for your staff report, first of all, it was very good. And I did look at the pre-application, which perhaps the website, it's on the website, so there is information on the website, and perhaps you could have maybe attached it to what we had in front of us today, because there's a lot of insights into that, of what the process will be when you go to file your application. And then it's a lot of land use in there, land use things that you will be doing. But for transparency's sake, how will the public know that?
Through Chair Wardlow, Commissioner Balke, I want to be clear, so they're not at this time asking for any additional land use entitlements. So if they were asking for a land use entitlement that allowed us to review the land use that they're proposing, that'd be one thing, but what they're proposing is something consistent with the zoning allowances and general plan, land use designation, and not going outside of that. So there isn't an entitlement request that we'd be analyzing.
But there will be, the staff will come up at the end with a resolution with conditions of what they need to do?
The map would have conditions on it. That is a discretionary entitlement that would be conditioned, but design review, design approvals typically do not have conditions associated with them. They do have to be consistent. They have to make the findings, so the compatibility findings consistent with design guidelines, et cetera. And then also, as we had stated, the project would still be subject to environmental review. So that's a whole process step that would have its own consideration, but that is separate from land use.
So I guess maybe is the application what they need to fulfill you gave them and told them, you gave them advice of what they needed to do in the pre-app. They file an application, and then they have to fulfill what's in the application. So there's a whole bunch of stuff they do need to do and go through a whole bunch of departments.
So that would be the application completeness phase. So yeah, so the requirements for the application would be vetted by planning staff when they submit their formal application, and they would need to provide all those items for the application to be complete to then even move forward to staff hearing officer or design review.
Okay. So now I have, okay, great. And the other thing is there'll be a process for environmental as part of the application. So I guess maybe I can talk to Jessica, the transportation. I guess my concern would be, so this is good to hear, you will be doing further analysis, and then from that you will be determining if it's if you'll do the IRI checklist, correct? And then you'll decide if it's a negative deck, mitigated negative deck, or if it does require further environmental study in the IR, then it would come before this body, I gather.
Commissioner DeLuccio, through the chair, yes, as with respect to the transportation lens, that's part of like the initial study checklist. We will be looking at the vehicle miles traveled analysis that's under the environmental review. We will, as a matter of policy, be analyzing the traffic as well, but there will be a lot of credit given the existing uses, the demolition, so a lot of trip credits that way. And because this is solely residential, it's just a matter of disclosing what the net impact would be, but really our growth management, our ordinance is targeted at non-residential because of the higher priority use is considered the residential. The other things in environmental review from a traffic and circulation perspective is just really looking at safety issues. And so the plans that we saw were very conceptual, so we need to be looking at all of the vehicular, bicycle and pedestrian much more closely than what the plans that we were given in our first review.
So it sounds like it's just a big site, so a lot of the analysis or input will be contained within the site, ingress, egress, and getting around the site, et cetera, safely with traffic. But how do, and then you do an analysis, I understand, of how it affects additional, the parking and also traffic trips. And I'm hearing from you that it, being this is non-residential, that it may not trigger anything?
It may not trigger anything.
Okay, so there'll be a lot, well, you need to determine there's a lot more cars coming in and out. I guess my gut feeling says it would create some congestion in the neighborhood, further congestion, traffic congestion, and how would, and that would, then it would be up to the applicant to mitigate that if you can show it.
That's correct. We'd be looking at that if there is an impact to an already impacted intersection. And then, again, we're reviewing on a project-by-project level. We review the entire city traffic model every 5 to 7 years approximately to look at developments that's commenced since then.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Commissioner DeLucio,
Yes.
through the chair, to, I think, to your and Commissioner Balke's question on mitigated neg decks and whether they come here. I'm sorry I couldn't answer it right away. We just updated our CEQA ordinance, so I'm not as up to speed. But it would come for public hearing to the Planning Commission if MND is needed.
Okay, that's good to know. And if I can ask the applicant a question?
Of course.
Couple of questions, the applicant. Thank you for your presentation. It was well done. You did another project in town on State Street?
Yes, we did.
What was the other project?
It was called Estancia. They were townhomes on State Street.
Oh, where the Sandman Hotel was or something? Where the hotel was there before? Was that a site with the hotel? Yeah.
Yes.
Was this the same team you used for that? Was it the same team that was used for that project?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know that. So you're still working out logistics of this project, because you typically, other ones that come before us, we see a lot more detail, and I didn't see a lot of detail as far as percent of the open space, so that has not been calculated yet, for example?
Well, the initial submittal was in compliance with what's required to be submittal, and from there to the point of submitting the formal application, as you see them today, we get into an iterative process where more detail is added, even though it's informal today compared to what you're supposed to be looking at, the original submittal. This will continue to be ripen into our formal submittal, which will be much more detailed.
And how are you going to fulfill the open space within the general plan for the public? I know privately, you're doing a lot internally, but how will the public benefit from this project?
Well, I think what we did here, as Scott mentioned, our treatment along Calle Real was something that is important for everybody, and I think we wanted to focus on that to be very activated, and so that's a good edge. It was never in our plans, but we just came up with this idea going along Arroyo Creek and doing that improvement, which is, again, intended to be used for public purposes as well as hopefully extending and being connected up to State Street. So those kinds of elements, along with what we're doing on La Cumbre and the pedestrian connectivity with the shopping center, all of that enters into, just trying to have a good interface with public.
And the building, the 10,000 square foot amenity building,
Yes.
What will that be used for?
Typically, what that is for our developments is a leasing space as well as Pilates, a weight room, maybe perhaps a meeting room, basically a indoor space for all of our residents.
Is there any possibility of having a meeting room like for non-residents, for the public in the neighborhood, if they wanted to meet there? Is there
I
anything
don't
we
think
can?
so. What typically happens in occasions where we have something that's intended to be a meeting with the public, whatever it might be, you know, a local issue that we're wanting to interface with not only our own people, but the public, you know, it's just like having a meeting room, but it's not intended to be open to, for the public general use.
I'm
no.
just looking for another public amenity there. That's fine, for the public, non-residents public. Just something, maybe something to input just to keep in mind. And also, will the creek be, will they be helping to restore the creek in any way? Maybe I can ask staff that question.
So with the formal application, we've requested a biological analysis of the creek and also identification of the top of bank. Based on that, we will be assessing whether there are any impacts of the development on the creek, and those, of course, would need to be mitigated. Also, when the project was initially proposed with just design approval, it didn't require general plan consistency findings. Now that the project will include a map, we will need to make findings for consistency with the general plan, so those policies related to creek protections and enhancement that I identified would apply to this project.
Okay, and thank you for reaching out to the
Just to add to that for a moment, basically our setback from the creek, if you look at the fence there, and I know you've been out there, it looks to be well past the top of bank, whatever that might be, wherever it is. We've tried to maintain an even further distance to our planned improvements for the open spaces, and that's principally because we really don't want to be ensnared in having to do things within the flood control channel vis-a-vis the creek and have Fish and Wildlife and Army Corps issues, because that, again, takes so much more time, and we're trying to get to the finish line with a project that has sorely needed housing for the city as quickly as possible.
How far are you back from the creek? Do you know how many feet? I mean, guys.
Well, right now, as Patsy said, you know, the top of bank hasn't been officially demarcated, so I'm not sure if we can answer that question precisely.
Okay, and thank you for reaching out to the Hope School District. I appreciate it.
Sure, of course.
Thank you for the answers. I'm fine for now.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLucia. We'll now hear from Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with a couple questions for staff. In page 4 of the staff report, notes the formal application will be required to include separate average unit size density calculations for each of the areas. So do we have the formal calculation? Is that the 44 plus the 0.3 in lieu?
So the density calculations, as I noted, let me find that slide. So we'll need to confirm that the density in the area of the 15 to 27 unit per acres is consistent with that maximum density, and then the density in the area that allows up to 63 units per acre is consistent with that density. We don't have that breakdown yet, so we don't. Overall, the project appears to be consistent with that, but we just don't have the specific numbers to confirm yet.
Okay, so that the number of affordable or moderate units could increase or decrease.
Right, 10% will be applied to whatever the total units are.
Okay, thank you. And then the staff report, page 5, talks a bit about the need for public open space and park space. And I appreciate on slide 16 you had the note where there would be open space, but this project proposes a path. So is staff working with the applicant for the Macy's project to continue that path that would lead to the public or open space?
So at this point, we haven't gotten into the details of coordinating those two projects. They don't quite connect. They don't touch each other. But that will be a consideration, is whether it happens with this project, we would, even if it doesn't, we'll want to think about what the future is and how that ultimately could be connected.
Great, thank you. And then last question for staff. Slide 17 was really helpful, and I didn't see that in our packets, and I'm wondering, Ms. Grant, can you walk us through it, because I think we only saw it for a few seconds.
Yes. This graphic is, again, from the Upper State Street guidelines. If you could follow the sort of the pedestrian bike trail connections. So that's basically where Patsy's pointing for the mouse, that again, the whole goal is for nice ped and bike connections along that creek trail, and then eventually it hits Hope. As you go more to the right, that's it becomes a lot more complicated. But I think when the original guidelines were being met was sort of the bypass to the very vehicular-dominated State Street. And that's what we continue to work on in the process as we review private development projects, because that where it's highlighted, not all of that is right of way. It would involve obtaining easements over time. But like one example of that, probably not too long ago, it was the Tesla dealership. So there was an easement taken for public access. So as properties redevelop, we'll be very mindful of trying to establish that so we could get some connections. I think the first slide that the applicants had, that their title slide was it was our grid network of our downtown, which is fabulous. But as soon as you come to this area, our grid is completely broken. And as we start to see density in this area, we need to be able to have really strong bike and walk connections to, again, because that's everybody's fears, is that there's going to be a lot of traffic congestion. And the only way to do that is to be able to establish these connections.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through that. And then the remainder of my questions are for the applicant. My first question, I watched the ABR hearing and was intrigued by the wrap parking and building concept. I wasn't familiar with that. Are there other similar projects in our region, so we might be able to wrap our heads around it if we're not familiar with that type of project?
That's a great question. I'm afraid I don't know.
Oh, you do know.
Good afternoon, R.C. Alley with AO. Probably the closest ones that you'll find are in the Warner Center area of Los Angeles. There are there are probably 15 projects of similar makeup.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And also for the applicant, the housing element program HE2, I think it was on a slide, but I didn't record which number, notes that this project will need to consider several factors, and there were two that were touched on lately that I'm hoping you can elaborate on, the impacts on nearby schools and affordable housing. And affordable housing, I understand that you're meeting the minimum units required, but it doesn't seem like anything else was considered in the efforts to develop more affordable housing. So can you talk more about considerations around affordable housing and the impacts on schools?
Let me take the second question first. You know, as I said, we're trying to approach this from following the city codes and guidelines and general plan policies. And in approaching the project like that with everything we're doing on the design, the idea is to then do our economics, and in this particular case, the demolition of the Sears building and a sea of parking and asphalt, you know, is a huge consideration in cost. So I think what we did, you know, and anticipating a question like this would come up, was stick to the game plan of staying with the city's vision for the property, which is exactly, as I've stated, at 10%. Moderate income, that's the zoning code requirement, and we certainly intend to meet that. But going beyond that is just there's only so many things in the pot we can do, and that's really the answer, I think. The first one is, you know, I don't know if we can solve the world's problems in the school districts. We've talked with Ann at the very beginning, and they have concerns which are certainly understood. I'm not sure our project is in any way not in compliance with what we have to do with respect to school fees or what have you, but we're just trying to be working along the lines of what we know, and I'm not sure we can go outside and do more particularly if it's not known what more is.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go for a question back to staff and then come back to the applicant. Just around development impact fees, can you talk about development impact fees related to schools?
Each project is required to pay development impact fees, including school fees. As Ms. Hubbard noted, those fees are set and based on their facility study, would not be enough to construct new structures. That is definitely a concern. It's a larger issue than something we can address typically on a project-by-project basis.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Back to the applicant, there were a couple of improvements that the ABR requested that I don't know that I saw in the presentation today. There's a concern the southern building would have many long interior hallways and asked for more attention to the landscape design and increasing the porosity of the buildings to connect to the landscape. Can you help me understand if that was addressed and I missed it?
Can one of you gentlemen speak to that?
He designs these day in and day out, so I'll let him answer. RC.
Could you ask me your exact question again?
Yes, so the notes from ABR were the board expressed concern that the southern building would have many long interior hallways and asked for more attention to the landscape design and increasing the porosity of the buildings to connect to the landscape.
So I can talk about the corridors and how we interface. Would it be okay if you put my screen back up? Thank you. All right, so basically you can see everything. We do have corridors, and what we do, let me try to point to these. Let's do that a little bit better. So basically what we do is you enter the parking, as you exit.
Can you lean a little closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. When you exit the parking structure into the building, you really exit the parking structure into a node. And so, for instance, we do try to limit the corridors, the corridor lengths, and we try to break them up with end nodes. So you can see a node, and a node. We also have, and we do that in multiple locations in the building, and that's how, and they are very pleasant locations. They're generally, all those nodes are enhanced. And so we're very cognizant of travel distances and how the corridors work. We also have connections from the building into each of the courtyards and connections through the courtyards, through the building, so that there is, again, it's a very well-connected and very kind of a porous connection through the building is probably the best way to say it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that
Sure.
specific attention. And then one other item that the ABR asked for that I may have missed was just additional detail on the elevation facing Arroyo Burro Creek.
Hello again. Find the exact one I'm trying to show you here. All right, so that is this edge. This is the Arroyo Burro Creek. And when we spoke to ABR, we did not have this section fully elevated, which we do now. So this is the edge. So if you can see the elevation on the bottom. And then we took two perspective shots. So the perspective shot kind of in the middle on the left would be looking as if you, when you kind of, the creek would be on the right and the building would be on the left. We did, again, as I mentioned earlier, tried to break the scale of this down. We have pedestrian entrances there. But this building is, this part of the building is very different because it's more of a neighborhood edge. So we have studied it in great detail.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate that. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you, Vice Chair Boss. We'll now hear from Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is directed to the applicant. You had a overhead that showed the circulation. Could you put that up for a moment?
Were you speaking about the bike and ped circulation specifically?
Well, it's got big fat arrows going in and going around, and it's a
perimeter shop.
It's a mix of vehicular and pedestrian, I think. And bicycles. Well, there, that kind of thing right there. Okay, hold it. My question is, to this north edge here, where my little red thing is, your property line, it looks like, touches right up next to those buildings on the outside. And yet your street improvements were only on your side. And so what is the treatment going to be for that area right there? Will it be treated as your personal driveway, or will it be treated as a public street and thus improved on both sides?
The property line, and it may be a question for the civil engineer, he maybe get his day in the sun here, but it runs to the curb on the far side of the street, or at least midway through the street. So what we are able to affect is our side of that street section. And I will jump back quickly to the section that we shared for that. So what we're proposing is, again, to add a sidewalk on, I'll say, our side of the street, which currently doesn't exist, to allow for better pedestrian connection from La Cumbre into the mall itself, create a landscape setback with street trees in that area as well, but to try to improve that condition, because right now it's effectively a drive into the mall. And so trying to actually bring, and I would submit be kind of, moving towards change, right? On the north side's a gas station and the Habit Burger and a lot of vehicular circulation. So we're trying to clean up our side of the edge, what we can control, and hopefully that sort of is catalytic to what eventually happens on the north side going forward, whenever that may be.
Okay, well, we'll get into comments at some point, but that road is yours. That entire roadway is yours, right? There is no portion of that roadway that's on the Hamburger Habit side.
They have setback from the curb to their.
But not the roadbed.
Right.
Now, that same question, if you could go back to that original overview of how the traffic was flowing across that aerial view. I have, right there. I have the same question right here. Are you treating this as a driveway, or are you recognizing it as a road that will lead to all these other commercial uses up here? Because it looks as though it's just like kind of a driveway thing, and yet it also looks as though it's going to act as basically a feeder street to all that parking. And I'm just curious how you intend to treat the design of that.
So currently it is access to the parking at the back of the mall, and it will remain the access to the parking at the back of the mall.
Well, not just access. I'm asking you how they're treating the design. Is it designed as a driveway, or is it designed as a road? And a road meaning curb gutter on all sides, that kind of thing.
It is intended, as to the engineering, I'll defer to the civil engineer, and obviously we're not at that point, but there will be curbs on both sides of it. There will be a planted parkway with street trees. There will be the multi-use path that we are proposing with seating along it, and additional landscape before we get to that existing fence. If you've been out there recently, that road largely sits almost against that fence at this point in time, and then it dumps into parking when you get to the back of the mall proper. So what we're attempting to do here is actually create something that is cleaner, more deliberate, continues to provide that access, continues to be a safer road to cross when it gets to Calle Real, but a more we'll call it an intentional street.
And is it going to be a dedicated public right-of-way, or is it going to be on your property and you maintain it?
I mean, it's on private property now theoretically, so it doesn't become a public street, if that's the question, and it would be maintained by the,
But it won't be a public right-of-way.
it's not now, and I don't
Okay.
believe it would become one.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnwell, we did also, the staff did not ask for that to become public right-of-way, just like some of the Macy's development, that would be private as well. But we needed to look and have the certain safety standards. And we've also asked, it's not in their presentation, again, we saw very conceptual drawings, but we did recognize that residents would need to get across to the Habit area, grocery store, and to, in the next iteration of drawings, when they submit the formal application, we're looking for a safe crossing across that drive.
Thank you.
Could I add something just to that circulation diagram? Maybe a little bit faint to see, but we are beginning to show those crosswalks that you spoke of. You know, we agree. That's the other piece of this diagram, is where those connectivity points happen. So, thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, one more time, if I may add, the original discussion of the specific plan of this whole area, said specific plan not having reached fruition yet, all of these roads were dedicated public rights-of-way. And this road right here and this road right here were seen as feeder streets to a very large geographical area consisting of Macy's and all the stores. And so that's why I was asking, are we talking about a driveway here? Or to what degree, Ms. Grant, are we requesting that they put in a road? Because this is a subdivision, and it's going to be big, and it's on their property too. It's not on the Habit guy's side.
Commissioner Barnwell, again, that's to, as we do more reviews for this project, but again, even if it remains private, just like the Macy's development, they still behave like public roads, and we would ask for public access. If you lived outside of this development, just like the mall, you're allowed to go into the mall. And so it would behave, we want it to behave public.
Well, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but the maintenance of it falls to whom?
The maintenance would fall to the property owner.
And, okay, all right, I won't say any more now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell. We'll now hear from Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Start with the applicant. I'll probably jump back and forth, but I had asked at the site visit, what's the height of the Sears building? So, and not the bottom level from, you know, where the Airbus goes.
So I have that on, I added a note on my section so I can point that out. There we go. So I can show it in the lower section, section BB. And I wish I had your laser pointer. You want to use it? It is right. No, I'll just point with the mouse. Thank you. It is right here. So this is really the outline of the Sears building. So section BB cuts through the building here. So the La Cumbre Plaza is here. The freeway is here. And so this kind of shows how the building sits. So to answer your question, it's about, if you go look at the Sears building, it's flat, and then there's like a pitched roof in the middle of it, kind of over the entrance. And that height is about 50 feet to the upper part of that pitched roof.
Okay, that's good enough. I don't need to be exact there. Thank you for that. And can you tell me what's the rationale for phasing the project?
Typically, on a large project like this, financing comes into mind in terms of being able to bite off that big of a chunk. 443 units is a pretty big chunk. It's not to say it can't be done in one phase, but our expectation is that it would be 2 phases.
Okay. And am I to understand you have had no coordination efforts with the Macy's project at this point?
We've talked, we've reached out to them, and they gave us some feedback on how to look at their plans. I'm not sure we've baked the plans enough to go over connectivity from their end to us, but I do believe that we've heard enough about their plans by our review of the archives to do what you've seen today, which is a healthy attempt to try to make sure we get good interface and connectivity eventually for the whole property, but certainly to, the retail spaces in between, and then what happens after that. For instance, like the walkway on Arroyo Burro Creek, that's something that you would probably expect to add conditions on some future project that would further that all the way up to State Street. And perhaps you're talking about that right now with respect to the 3805 project. But, we set the table here with trying to do it right on the edge there, and hopefully that'll materialize into a great piece of connectivity.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the Macy's project their application's deemed complete, is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and then, I don't know who wants to answer this, but quite a few ABR members recommended that the massing be moved towards the center of the project and away from the perimeters, and I wondered if you're exploring this concept.
Well, I think that the goal here is to provide as many housing units as we can possibly do under the existing zoning, which is intended to be, in my estimation, a very high-density project, even though it doesn't reach anywhere near the limits of the density allowed. But to do this, what you see is what you get in terms of trying to get the biggest yield. And I don't know if I stated that correctly, but
I understand what you're saying.
accurately, but that's the idea, is to stay within the code at 45 feet maximum height limit and place as many units as possible, and yet address all of the other regulatory provisions such as open space parking, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, and then we have a lot of general plan policies. We're supposed to comment on both the design and also general plan. It's hard to comment on the design on this project because it is so conceptual at this point. But
yes.
But I do appreciate some of the new things that you've shown us, the elevations, et cetera. So we have under environmental resources element, energy efficient buildings, ER 5.1, encourage all new buildings to be designed and built consistent with city green programs, California Green Building Code policies, and goals of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030 in all buildings. So can you comment on that general plan policy in relation to this project, since we have to comment on general plan policies?
I think from the beginning, both with the Upper State Street guidelines as well as the general plan policies, whatever element you want to speak to, we provided a matrix, if you will, that listed all of the policies and how we complied with those or addressed them. And I think that's part of the original filing, isn't it, Patsy?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I mean, to get into a line item, I'm not sure exactly how we answered that one. We can, if you give me a moment, I'm sure we can look at that, but
No, that's okay.
the body of work that's been submitted does have this rather extensive matrice that addresses each and every topic on policies.
Okay, does it talk about solar? Are you putting solar on this project?
I believe we are. Yes. Yes.
Okay. And there's another environmental resource policy about riparian woodland protection. Are you enhancing the landscape within the creek buffer or in consultation with the Creeks Division?
Well, we're working with the Creeks Division to make sure they understand what we're doing and vice versa, but our intent is not to get into Our property line, by the way, goes to the center line of the creek, but we're not, and we're purposefully not trying to do anything associated with the existing resources within the creek. We're trying to stay away from it, in fact, to make sure that we don't have additional regulatory permitting to go through and issues that might arise with however we would approach it. You know, I think it's something that we just want to say we're respecting that, and our project doesn't touch it, if you will.
Is this an area of the creek that has already been enhanced in the previous project that was done at the golf course, et cetera?
Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair, I don't believe it has. It still does have a concrete bottom.
Oh, okay, okay. So might there be a requirement to enhance to improve the creek through the Creeks Division might require that?
So as I mentioned, the project will be required to analyze any impacts that it has on the creek that could trigger a requirement for some enhancement of the creek. Also, and this is new because the project did not previously have the map for the lot split included in what staff reviewed. With that, the tentative map requires a finding of general plan consistency. So we'll be looking at all of those creek policies and whether there would be any requirements for compliance for restoration based on those general plan policies. We've not yet reviewed that.
Can the Creeks Division require that since they go to the, did you say you go to the center line of the creek or the?
Yes, center line.
Can the Creeks Division require that enhancements or improvements be made to the creek buffer?
Chair Wardlow, to Commissioner Wiscombe, the creeks is usually done through the environmental review because we don't have an ordinance presently in place except with respect to Mission Creeks. So we look at the creeks when we look at the environmental review. And if, for example, if it needs an M&D because of that, then we could, that would be one of the mitigating factors.
But it's only.
But they can't condition, they cannot just condition it.
Okay, so it's only if there's an impact on the creek.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that answers that. And then we have in the conservation element, we talk about permeable surfaces to minimize stormwater runoff. And do you intend to use permeable or pervious surfaces? I don't know, maybe that's a question.
This is right up Scott's alley here.
Yeah.
I think it's certainly at this point, and because it is early, something we're looking at for certain areas. I think one of our biggest ambitions is obviously to make as much of the site planted and soft compared to what it is now. So, but as we finalize paving, it'll come down to sort of overall design and where we can look at things like decomposed granite and stone fines and other materials that allow max permeability. Obviously, with fire lane and things like that, we're going to be more limited, but certainly we're going to look at all those options.
Okay, and while I have you, this wasn't going to be one of my questions, but I'm going to turn it into a question. We've received public comment about, is there a grassed lawn area for children to play on, or perhaps a play structure, a space for dogs to exercise and relieve themselves? And do we have any of those types of spaces so far proposed in this project?
Within the area we're calling the Commons, which is in the seismic easement, we are creating a series of lawn terraces there that we, see as being used for passive play, gatherings, outdoor, could be an outdoor movie for the community and whatnot.
Okay, because I didn't see where that was on the plan. I mean, I saw the volleyball, the sand volleyball, the pools.
And the dog room.
Yeah. Well, I try to find the right slide.
That's all right.
We are going to include a dog run because it's quite important to have that for residents.
Okay.
And also, accommodating an area for kids as well, as we expect they will be part of the community.
So are you anticipating a play structure or just an area, a grassed area for them to play?
My expectation would be some elements of play, whether it's a structure, whether it's more nature play. I think that's something we're still looking at. Again, it's early days, but I'm a fan of more natural play versus steel pipes. But, again, that's something we're going to be exploring.
Oh, I see where it is.
Yeah,
I think I just saw it.
There we go.
Yeah, there it is, yeah.
So those are, because of the grade that's falling through there, we're looking at them as a series of terraces. So, it's a place you could throw a ball, you could have a picnic. As I said, you could put a movie screen if you wanted to do a little movie in the park. So it meant as a sort of flexible community space within the project itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me just see if I, are you working on another comment by ABR, I think Board Member Black said, landscape along La Cumbre needs more vertical elements and vertical massing. Are you working on doing that?
Yes, in general, against all building edges, thus far, we've managed to create a fairly generous landscape setback to allow for layers of trees, additional layers of landscape. I mentioned on Calle Real, in particular, because of air quality concerns, we're going to be really focused on a double row of trees and getting that layering there as well. And if I may go back to your comment about the creek, while everything Dave said is correct, because of this move with the road, street, drive, whatever we want to call it, moving that over, it's allowing us more real estate to add more planting buffer, and that planting would be compatible with and complementary to what's in the swale. The idea of expanding that habitat is very important along that edge, so we're going to leverage that opportunity to grow that landscape there.
Okay, and then are you, since I'm going to get into the weeds, because we have all these general plan policies in our staff report.
Are you going to name the weeds as Ms. Loge did? Just curious.
No, I know, you don't like weeds,
Okay.
I'm a retired landscape architect, I didn't like weeds either.
All right.
Okay, in the conservation element, water resources, it talks about innovative water conservation techniques such as gray water recycling. Are you considering things like that on this project?
I'm going to defer to to Dave to talk about water systems. Certainly from a landscape point of view, we're going to be using native and drought-tolerant material as much as possible. I will say to the question that was asked earlier about, looking at our neighbor's project to the north, that's the one thing I've reached out peer-to-peer to look at compatibility of plant palette as well, so that we're not talking about two different things on either end of the mall. So, but
okay,
Dave, I don't know if you want to talk about water.
Yeah, I think our plans are not that fully developed yet, but my expectation would be that we would not do a separate piping system to recapture gray water. I just don't think a project of this size in and of itself is economically going to offset the benefits, if you will. I mean, it sounds...
One of our favorite words is pencil out. So
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think it's crass to say that, but it's a consideration that's important. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. There was a comment by Vice Chair Whelan at ABR of exploring moving the amenities building to the La Cumbre Road frontage and the apartment building to the interior because of, and I just wondered if you have addressed that or looked at that as a possibility. And he had good reasoning for it, that, that road is not all that pleasant. So it might be a better place for the amenities building, but.
I think that was part of that initial slide of the urban context that I started with. I think the impetus for that was move the smaller building out to the street, move the bigger building back. And I submit that we should be looking forward to what La Cumbre wants to become. I'm not convinced that adding another small building that's a complement to 2 gas stations and a pet station is the right move. I see it as an important street, a gateway to Upper State Street and how these work. And so I think our contention is that having a good edge on La Cumbre, having a good edge at that north drive and holding that corner, and again, trying to be catalytic for what the future of that street is and looking forward, because I can't imagine that those gas stations will be there in perpetuity. I want to believe they won't be. And that as your city continues to kind of grow, we want to sort of be leading in that regard. So I think that was part of the reason of not bringing another small-scale building out to the street, but to actually have a better street edge there that sets things in motion, hopefully.
Okay,
Hopefully that answers your question.
that's a good explanation.
Thank
of
you.
looking forward. Thank you for that. Let me see what else I have here. Oh, okay, I have a question. I think, Ms. Grant, this is probably for you. I can't help myself, got to always ask you a question. Actually, I don't know if it's for you, but in terms, you could answer it in terms of transportation. So we have the Macy's project, and we have the Sears project. And if one goes through environmental review before the other one does, is it possible that the other one may have greater impacts because of the impacts from the first project? Am I making myself clear as mud, or what? I don't, I mean, we have two very large projects at La Cumbre Plaza, and how do they intertwine in terms of the environmental review? And I'm asking you because you could at least probably answer that from a traffic and circulation standpoint.
Yes, Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair. Each land development project has to be evaluated on its own merit. So in that point, it's sort of tunnel vision with respect to that. How they're connected, it's not necessarily an environmental thing, but from a transportation perspective, is because the campus is so big and it's being divided for to try to understand parking, because the whole campus was a shared parking situation. So there's certain things that I think, because Macy is at this point, the redevelopment of Macy's is ahead of this, and so they're tasked to be answering that question first, but it's together with all these projects, we need to understand that better to make sure the remnant of La Cumbre Plaza is still whole from a parking perspective. That's not necessarily environmental review, but we have, again, with our applicant meetings, have tried to put them both in touch. So we have some drawing sharing just to recognize connectivity. We've also met with both the Macy's and Sears redevelopment teams to make sure that they understand sort of grand visioning for overall circulation of these sites and how they interface with the mainline circulation systems.
So when you look at these, you actually look at the whole of La Cumbre, but in other words, so for traffic issues or anything, you're looking at the whole thing for not only the uses at the plaza that are still there, stores and restaurants, et cetera, but then the Sears and then the Macy's and how that will all impact.
Yes, one example of that is there's, for the Macy's redevelopment, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be any queuing for the development on mainline State Street. In order to understand that analysis, we have asked them to make sure that the Sears redevelopment in that analysis is pulled in. So we're using the most up-to-date information for that analysis to make sure that there isn't any impacts. That's just one example.
Okay.
But I guess the short answer is we have to evaluate each project on its own merits, but we can't review projects in a tunnel. Like we have to recognize
You have to look at
connectivity,
the- yeah.
and just with anything, it's pieces of the puzzle. And so if one of the puzzle pieces goes in, it might look awkward right when it goes in, but over time you build the networks, so it will
Right.
make sense.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I've asked enough questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Commissioner Bauke.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask the elephant in the room question here, which is, we have a policy, land use element policy 15.2, which is specific to the La Cumbre Plaza specific plan. We also have the housing element program HE2. Both of them call for a specific plan, and we know the history about why we're not getting a specific plan. But as we saw on the Macy's project, there's still a requirement for an initial framework that addresses it holistically. I would presume this project would also have that same requirement to at least make the findings on the map, and from planning theory, your zoning ordinance needs to be consistent with the general plan, so I would presume that would be also the case. How is this situation being addressed, especially on the area circulation? Because I think that's the big one here. Could staff talk about how that's going to be addressed between, we've got two projects at two ends. You got a non-participant party in the middle. Give us some guidance.
Chair Bucky through the chair, or excuse me, Commissioner Bucky through the chair. We have in the staff's pre-application review letter indicated to the applicant that they will need to identify, and as you've seen a little bit in their slides, they have started to think about those connections, but identify how the project will relate to and connect in terms of circulation, shared open space, transit, all those connectivity issues with the surrounding area, including the mall property. So we've asked for that information with the formal application, and we'll be evaluating that against general plan policies, including HE2 and LG15. We are limited in terms of the scope of review, or the scope of what we can require, because they are their own project and they are proposing the project, which is allowed under the current zoning. So we can't require a specific plan of this project, but we can certainly review it based on the items that were identified in each of these policies as considerations for how it fits in with the larger community, with the larger surrounding area.
And that review could, from your perspective, look at how all this networks together. I mean, I think that's probably the fundamental thing, is how they tie together. Because I'm honestly very concerned about what I saw in one of the comment letters, and I presume this is from the mall owner, saying that the access easements will disappear. This is the last letter we had in a comment from Holland, from Mr., what is his name here?
Mr. Lyons.
Mr. Lyon.
Mr. Lyons represents the Macy's project.
Oh, the Macy's project, okay. So we have an issue there between the two of the, one end and the other, and I know the comments, I've seen the comments from the mall owner, which is basically just leave us alone, sort of basically a layman's way of putting it. How are you going to get this all to work? I really am concerned this is going to be a disaster. Just put it out there. And I understand circulation is probably the key thing here. And I do want to note before I'm trying to understand, we also need to make consistency findings with the Upper State Street study. And I was looking through all the lovely documents doing research here. And there's a summary of improvements measures on page 14 that's part of the council resolution for that, which talks about north-south and east-west connections. Last time when I was up here talking about the Macy's project, I put a diagram out there, and I will bring that up again in the commentary about what's intended, is intended, and this isn't with the specific one, this is already something we already have, so we're not like, this project should be compliant with it, at least that would be a logical thing. So how is this all going to work? Already, Jessica, please tell me how this is all going to work, because I just don't understand how it's all going to work.
Commissioner Bakke, through the chair, I could take a few minutes. You almost have to break down each of the road users with respect to circulation. So I'll keep it high level for vehicle access. We wanted a multitude of access points and not just one dominant access point. So to not tax the rest of the impacted intersections. The bike access, ped access, I think those are the ones that we're spending the most time with. We would probably consider these from a staff level very amenity light, as you've mentioned, with no parks or there is some parks, there's some greenery, but we're sort of in a park desert. In this area, there's nothing really walking distance. So the sidewalks and bike paths become the living space. So as we review these in more iterations, we're trying to make, so if somebody is the resident, after the developers are long gone, can walk around this whole campus. Because really that's your outdoor, that will be the kids' outdoor space. And that needs very much a lot of attention. So that's what we're looking at. We've had a lot of meetings with the Macy's team. We will be asking for more meetings with the Sears redevelopment team.
Okay, thank you. I got some questions for the applicant. And probably the designer, Mr. Edie, well, actually one for you.
Okay.
Which council's going to say you don't have to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Your current,
I'll plead the fifth.
current assessed valuation on the holdings in question currently shows up on the tax records is $9.5 million. I know you've been in the business a long time, and you've been in the business when there was such a thing called redevelopment. This project, when it's stabilized and all done, will have a fairly significant higher value. Do you have a projection of what that is? I'm trying to, in my understanding and for the public, get an understanding of what the tax increment possibility is on this property.
Yes, I understand the question. Well, one would hope that it'll appreciate. You know, I think at the time when we get through the whole entitlement process, we go through the whole design process, building permit process, demolition process, and building the vertical, what do the rents look like at that time, which is an indicator of, basically calculating a value for the property.
And then a cap rate on top of that to get to.
Yeah, so it's pretty far down the road, but,
But it would be significant. I mean,
I think it'd be very significant, yes.
Okay, you don't have to give the
No,
actual
understood.
number. Nobody knows that number until you stabilize your rent, so.
Yeah, I didn't plead the fifth.
Okay. Some have wanted to. The frontage along La Cumbra is something in which I think your designer, the landscape, and I agree with his comment. And the question is, are you looking at like 14-foot plate heights along that edge so it feels and more urban than the other frontages? Because it is sort of a major corridor. And
At this time, no, we're not. We're doing 9-foot plates along that edge.
Okay, even though there's some architectural stuff that makes it look like it's higher in the drawings, you understand?
Because we've combined 2 stories,
Raised
into
it with the
2-story arches
arch.
and a colonnade that's 2 stories in height.
Okay, so that's how you're approaching that, but it does give you the feeling it's higher, and okay, so. Did you consider, the folks at Macy's are doing on their frontage along State Street, any kind of live-work type product in which would, because that's going to be a very busy place, it's not going to be the world's greatest place to be a resident, so.
That's just not in our program on this
Okay.
particular project.
Okay. Yeah,
And typically, live work is a townhome and a subdivided ownership circumstance.
well, I've seen them done in rental
Yes,
formats too,
it
but
can be
okay.
done with
but-
apartments,
okay,
there's no
but
doubt.
This is not something, I just want to put that out there, of whether that would be something you might want to consider. Do you have any response to the letter from the Macy's folks about your access rate issues?
Actually, I haven't seen the letter.
Oh, okay.
Was it posted today or
It was late yesterday afternoon.
late yesterday? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it yet.
Okay,
Haven't read it.
okay. I'd be concerned if I was you. Okay, so, and maybe this is to the landscape architect. Could you walk us through a little bit about the interface of the existing mall? I mean, if I'm sitting in the parking lot, walking down from Starbucks towards what is Mattresses Mike now, what's that going to feel and look like? I mean, are we going to be seeing a concrete barrier wall and some landscaping in front of it that separates? Or, I mean, how soft is this? Is this going to be a boundary or a soft edge? How's that going to feel and look?
Sure. I'll talk to the plan and then the section. Our ambition is that would be a low garden wall, in the 24-inch height. I think obviously the way the parking lays out, there's actually a drive lane against that wall, so having some kind of impediment, but ultimately to have a fairly thickly planted, lush edge there, trees there as well, and create, a nice condition along that edge of the parking lot. I think we're as interested about what you see from north looking south as anyone else. And so I think the importance of creating a sort of a green edge along there is quite important to us. And then I would say just when we get down to the end, again, our property line runs all the way over, if you can follow my mouse, creating that space where we're expanding kind of the mall circulation to create a node, to create a small plaza at that end as well, is another piece of making sure we reconcile all that circulation there as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one more design question, which is, if you could pull up the site plan, that'd be great. Which is the very, very corner of La Cumbre and Cala Real. Did you consider, or would you consider, moving your amenity building uses to that corner? Because that is not a great place to habitate. So on the ground floor, would you consider having that active space so people, when they drive by, see activity at this corner versus it being buried behind other buildings?
I'll let RC talk to the building corner itself. I would say that the relationship of that amenity building to what we're calling the commons, the outdoor space amenities, and having that be a tight relationship is important to us. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. RC can speak to the building itself.
RC Alley. We looked at it a lot of different places, but we really want it where it is because of just what Scott said, of its relationship to the commons. Because that's a phenomenal amenity for our project, and we feel that it needs to be contiguous with the commons. So that's why we've located it at that location, not on the corner. We also believe the corner is it's not central to the project really at all. It would be very inconvenient for most of our residents to use. So no, it's not our intention to put it there.
Okay, one more question, which is that where that building we're talking about currently is, that whole, you sort of have a block here. Did you look at a much more intensive residential project or building there? I believe some of the members of the Design Review Committee, yes, that block.
In this area.
Brought that up, and I definitely concur with their comments. Did you look at that?
So we did not look at that. We had conversations about that early on. It's a very small, try to speak into the microphone here. It's a very small parcel. It would require a podium-type project to be able to park the project if we did a more intensive project there. Again, because because of the fault zone, it's a very small isolated piece. So we did not pursue that.
Okay, thank you. I've got one last question that you brought up, which has triggered me a question to the staff. We have this fault zone. My experience with fault zones is you don't know where exactly they are until you trench for them. So how is that working with these folks? Are they going to have to go do some trenching to nail it down, or is this going to be, hey, surprise? Because I've had that surprise before on some of my projects, that the fault line wasn't exactly where people thought it was, and it changed, and you had to move things around. And how is the applicant and yourselves going to address that? Because it definitely could change the whole configuration of this project if it moved 20 feet one way or the other, so.
So Chair Bucky through the chair, Commissioner Bucky through the chair. The applicant has just submitted a geotechnical report and fault investigation report, which we are having peer reviewed. And that will be the start of the analysis related to that. I'll let Mr. Eady speak to trenching and investigations that they've done so far.
Yes, the geotechnical report Patsy refers to did have some trenching involved. That's a surprise that we would not want to see downstream after spending this kind of amount of money and time to go through this project. So establishing where that suspected fault is and its appropriate setback, a very ample setback, I think was of paramount importance to us before we really got going too far in earnest here.
So you've nailed it down enough that you're comfortable?
I think so.
You're not going to get a surprise down?
You know, it's 6 miles down, so.
Yeah, no,
you know.
I know. It's hard to figure out
Yeah.
exactly where these are. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Bauke. We will now hear from Commissioner Boss and then Commissioner Wiscombe, and then we will take a brief break.
One more question for staff. In the housing element update, this site was in the suitable sites inventory for 525 units, and that included 104 low-income and 131 moderate. So since we're only getting 44, my understanding is that we would have to identify another site where we could produce that number of low and moderate income units. Can you speak to that?
Chair Wardlow, Commissioner Voss, that is correct. That happens much later in the process, though. Those findings aren't made at this preliminary stage, but rather with the project approval.
Okay, so has the city identified another site where we'll have 150 units?
So the sites inventory was built in, there was a buffer of additional units accounted for in our sites inventory analysis to allow for it, because we know some projects would probably come in with slightly less than what they could be allocated for. So that buffer was built into the sites inventory as it is.
And what was the buffer amount?
I don't have that information.
I'm just, we keep seeing projects doing the bare minimum in terms of low and moderate, so I'm concerned that that buffer is no longer much of a buffer.
And if that is the case, it would be on the city to identify those sites, not a developer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Boss. Now we'll go to Commissioner Wiscombe.
I just had a follow-up question. Since you have done a geotech report, I'm just curious, so you've investigated the auto center, is that correct? Is that part?
I'm not sure we have. I mean, I think we hired a very excellent firm, and they did what they had to do to establish, where the fault was on our property. I'm not sure there's anything off-site that it addressed.
Well, you're demolishing the auto center, right?
Oh, the auto center. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I was thinking of the auto dealerships,
No.
if you will. Sorry about that. My bad. In terms of just,
Have you done borings or something at the auto center is part of
Yeah.
of the geotech
Yeah,
report?
are you
That's what I'm asking you.
okay, from the standpoint of assessing environmental issues associated with the former use of that property, there was a Phase 1 environmental assessment done.
Okay.
And once that property is demolished, or that improvement is demolished, there'll be further testing of whatever that soil looks like. It's not in the realm of the geotechnical investigation for the fault, really. It has to do with just the
okay.
usage of that building,
Right.
which was.
Oh, I thought you said you'd done a full-blown geotechnical report of the whole site.
Not site-wide, no, just,
okay.
just where
I
the suspected fault was from the city records and state records.
Okay,
And then we went from there on where that particular fault lies.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I misunderstood, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
not at all.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much to my fellow commissioners for their extremely thorough comments. I do not have any further questions. I feel like we have asked a number of questions of you all. So we are now going to we'll reconvene at 3:45, and then we'll go to commissioner deliberations where we'll summarize everyone's feedback. Thank you. We will reconvene the meeting now at 3:46 PM. Commissioner DeLuccio has one more question, so we're going to allow him to ask that now, and then we will move on to deliberations.
You want can I do both? Just ask my question, then move it on? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Thank you. I do have a question of the applicant. I just wanted to see one thing, the design of the building. Maybe show me, we can go to the page that shows the, did you add more projections to the project? More, when you, if you go, first of all, did you break up the building more?
Yes.
Can we look at that real fast? And then it looks like you added more projections, towers or something to the building. I could be mistaken. Since it went to ABR.
So we do have more views of the building.
I mean, more if you go to the, an illustration of the building. Of the, if you, on the bottom there. Is that the same picture as presented to ABR on the bottom?
So the one in the upper left is the same. The one in the lower right is an additional view that I added because I wanted to give you additional clarity on what the project looked like.
Okay, so that's
But
ABR
it's the
has seen
same.
that.
This is the first that's been published.
Yeah, but I mean, when you presented to the ABR, did it have all these towers?
It did.
Okay, so the tower was so when it went before ABR, look at their pictures, it didn't look like it had that many towers.
So the view in the upper left is the exact same view that we showed to ABR. But what we did was, again, a more horizontal, we simplified the building. We really incorporated the comments that they made. But this actually had the exact same two towers that it had previously.
Okay, the towers are the same, but you've done more articulation to the building.
We have, and it's more horizontal, if you can see beyond, if you can see right here. Really, that was, we had many more vertical elements within the building at that, when we were at ABR. And this is a horizontal two-story arcade to really emphasize the horizontal nature of the building more and to simplify it and calm it down a little bit, which is what was suggested.
Okay, and I have one final question. The phasing of the project, maybe someone can answer that question. How is it, how's it, tell me about the phasing. Is that just the north side first, the amenity building and the 43 units? Is that what phase one would be, or is there more to it than that?
So phase one, essentially, let's see, there's a phasing line. This doesn't show the phasing line well, but the phasing line is approximately here. I think it's out through here. It's something like that. It is, so this parking structure is broken into two pieces that are representative by the colors, but it's I had a phasing line in one of my plans, and I'm sorry, it must have been removed when I was modifying the presentation.
So some of the north, some of the, it encompasses the amenity building, the 43 units, and
Yes.
some of the,
And some of the wrap building.
Some of the wrap building.
Which is approximately at this line, and I think it goes up and over like that, something in that range.
so it would be a majority of the,
It's about half and half is what it really ultimately is.
oh, it'd be half of the project?
Approximately.
Okay, gotcha, and then the other half.
Approximately,
And you
yes.
wouldn't know the timeframe, and it's based on financing?
As far as I know, I'm just the
He's shaking
architect,
his head.
fortunately, so I don't have to worry about that part.
Okay. I'm good. I just have a couple of comments I don't have a lot of comments.
All right, we will now move on to deliberations, and Commissioner DeLuccio will kick it off.
Okay. I think there's more detail now that we learned today, but I think on other projects we've looked at, we've actually had more detail in front of us in terms of, the percent of the lot that would be open space. We actually got to look into the units a little bit to see how they were allocated among the projects. So we haven't seen a lot of that detail today. So, that would have probably been a little more helpful. And also, when you allude to the type of building that you're putting together, the wrapping, is it wrapping you said? Of the wrap, and you alluded to a Warner Center. I don't think, to me, that's not a good analogy. That's a lot of Warner Center is a lot of hardscape out there. I know where Warner Center is. I won't equate it quite to Century City, but there's a lot of buildings and it's a lot of hardscape. I'm not looking, this one I'm just commenting. And I'm just a little concerned that, and I think the board was concerned also, the ABR, that we need to make it have more of a Santa Barbara feel to the building. So that's just my observation. And also, when I was alluding to the open space, I was alluding to like a neighborhood community room, is what I was talking about. That the neighbors in the neighborhood can be brought into if they needed a space to meet, a community type room, is what which would have liked to have seen in the project. I know the buffer is good, what you do in the buffer and the trail, that's great. That to me is an amenity for the community, not only for the residents of the complex. And I like the units that are facing away from the freeway. Instead, they're facing into the courtyard. I think that's really good. And I also, as we alluded to, as part of the open space, some kind of children's play area, which I think you're going to do a dog area, but if we can have some kind of dedicated play area for children, that would be good too. Because I imagine there'll be families living in this complex, a good number of families. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. We'll now hear from Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. I'm going to be... okay, so my comments are in no particular order are encourage coordination efforts with Macy's. I think that's really essential. Also, I encourage architectural variations in style and detail for interest. I think you're already starting to do that. I think maybe more of that needs to be done. And I still like the ABR was really quite a few of them, of the board members had talked about explore moving the massing, moving it more towards the center. And perhaps one place to do that might be at the, what Commissioner Bauke was talking about, I think it was Commissioner Bauke, at the La Cumbre Calle Real corner. Maybe, you could push that back a little bit and make that a little softer there, move some of the massing away there. Policy, I think it's energy policy, 5.1, build consistent with green energy projects. I think that's important. ER 6.6, solar, we talked about that. I think that's you said you're doing that. And the conservation element, CDF 2.4, I don't know where we get all these numbers. Permeable and pervious surfaces, I think as much as we can do is really essential there. And then the circulation element, 13.1, incorporate the goals of the circulation element into the project in the best ways that we can. I think that's very important. The circulation is going to be very important on the site, period. It's got to be well addressed. And one comment I want to make, well, I might save that to the end. Let me just see. I think I have a couple more here. One of the board members, Vice Chair Whalen, said that the applicant should have a section that includes complete width of Calle Real and drop down to the 101 freeway. I think so a section through there would be appropriate. And then the open space parks and recreation element, I think Commissioner DeLuccio just commented on this, but it's OP1 variety and abundance, provide ample open spaces and a variety of open spaces. And I think you're starting to do that. You talked about a dog area. There has to be a play area for kids. You talked about the lawn space. I think the natural play areas would be nice, but they need to have a place to stay, or place to play. And then provide a mix of deed-restricted units and intersperse them on all floors in both buildings and do not cluster them together. I think that is will be in agreement with everyone up here. My last comment is it's important and essential, and some of the board members talked about this, ABR members. It's important and it's essential to illustrate context, and I don't think that these plans have done that so far. You want to show sections that include adjacent buildings at La Cumbre Plaza to illustrate the context. So you want to get your site in context with the things that you're not working on and not doing, so we can see what. I think that's a really important part, and I think it's something that was pretty frustrating in these drawings. I appreciate your presentation and all the extra work you've done to get to this point, but I think that's, in the end, as Ms. Grant says, you got to look at the big picture here, and I think that's essential to illustrate that context wherever possible. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Now we'll hear from Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My opening remarks, I want to mirror what Commissioner Balke said in his very first comments on this, that it's unfortunate that it isn't being done the way we used to do things like this. It breaks my heart. It truly, truly breaks my heart. And we are keepers of the flame, and yet we cannot do that here. And it's frustrating. So as you can hear from what the board is saying, we're picking away at little corners of it to see if it can come back again and we can begin to talk about it. I would like, could we put up whatever a aerial that includes State Street as well as this? Do we have one of those slide decks? No, the one that's just like the one you had on the board, but it goes all the way to State Street. So it's just this. Yeah, that. Okay, that'll work. Thank you. So there are so many things wrong with the current project, and yet we seem to be stuck with thinking the way the existing project has been laid out way back in the 60s. We did that with the airport, where we were looking at roads, and we thought, well, we're going to go here, and what we didn't realize that the road was made by a Marine in a Caterpillar tractor, and he just cut a road. And that's kind of what we have going on here with this thing along the creek. I mean, we would not permit that under current ways we design things. And regardless of what anyone else says to the contrary, this road right here needs to be called a road, R-O-A-D, not driveway, and it needs to acknowledge that it's feeding all of this area up here. And as a consequence, it needs to be thought of in those terms and designed in those terms. The early discussions of how to do the La Cumbre Plaza specific plan looked at the existing little streets, this one right here, and this one right here, and this one right here, and the other one. This is a driveway. It's not a street. This one is a driveway, not a street. I think that's a huge mistake to look at those entrance points as anything other than, 60-foot right-of-way, 50-foot right-of-way, curb gutters, streets on both sides. Now, the fact that the Hamburger Habit ends at the curb, I don't think relieves the applicant of their requirement to make that look like a road, not just internally, but how it intersects with La Cumbre Plaza and with La Cumbre Road. And the same way here. I mean, I've been going in and out of that since the mall was built, and it looks like an afterthought. When you turn off of Kyrell and you go up there, it's an afterthought. It would break my heart to think that we just kind of put some lipstick on the pig here. We need to think beyond what it actually is. There was a gentleman here who spoke from the community, and he said he lived over here in the affordable housing project that just got put in by the, and he said there's no discussion of that. Well, man, oh man, is he ever right. I mean, everyone, and as you know, I'm a land use consultant, and I have talked with dozens and dozens of people who live here. And when they think of going to the La Cumbre Plaza, they get in an automobile, and they drive up this way, and they hit State, and then they come over here on State, and they go back inside there. They have no full understanding that they are less than 150 feet from this entire project. But they can't get there from here without doing the whole car thing. And Ms. Grant, I would like to just plant the seed in you. I don't know how you're doing your transportation stuff, but the failure of this entire mall to acknowledge all of the residences that are over here, and it's a reciprocal thing. It isn't just that these residences need to be able to get here to utilize the facilities, but these people in this new proposed project should be aware of the fact that right across the creek is a movie theater and a restaurant and a whole bunch of other stuff that they could walk to. But we aren't addressing those pedestrian components of this. And there is so much in our code that talks about, reducing carbon footprint and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And those are what we're about. And we seem to have kind of pushed those off in a corner, trapped as we are with this entire La Cumbre development. But I would like us to be more stalwart in defending Santa Barbara in how we do this. So I'm going to come down heavy on the idea of the circulation. It just isn't even close to where it needs to be. And insofar as is this the piece that is going to be part of the lot split thing? And this road, as best I can tell, just ends right here. Well, if we did not agree to the lot change, then that road could continue in a fashion that would intersect with this other main entrance point. And the Architectural Board of Review talked about the east-west connectivity. They're not planners like we are, but there's a north-south connectivity that's giant, and we're just kind of shining it on. And then it comes to the question of, well, how much does this particular applicant have to acknowledge and interface with the other parts of the plaza? I think a bunch. I think it has to acknowledge and interface a bunch with that. And a lot of that is, how the traffic patterns work. It just seems to me that. I would also like to come down on the issue of schools. Man, oh man, they're going to be heavily impacted. And we don't have the development fees, I don't think. My understanding of them isn't sufficient to really meet the needs of Hope, and I don't think this project should do all the heavy lifting for Hope. But it's something that our city should be looking at as this gets developed. There's going to be a lot of kids there. And it's not going to have a target audience like the Mark, where they're kind of groovy, empty nesters and things. This will be people that have kids. And they're going to go to Hope School, and Hope School is already impacted, and they can. So I would encourage a genuine sit down with the school districts and let's talk, whether we can solve it or not, but see what they need and how maybe 2 years from now we can implement that into the way we plan things. The creek, man, oh man. We've talked forever about taking the concrete bottoms out of creeks. And we've talked how important that is to refilling the aquifers. And this project goes to the center line of the creek. I mean, it doesn't get to go all the way across, but it does go to the center line. And I think that should be discussed in any way at all that we can enhance the natural character of this side of the creek, and also to replenish the aquifers in whatever design we use. I think that would be very, very important. And And I want to also acknowledge to the staff that I know we are constrained in so many, many ways. But I think we should wrestle that to the ground as effectively as we possibly can, because this was said on a discussion on the Milpas project a couple of weeks ago. One of the architects said, well, you know, we're not talking about downtown. I mean, it's just Milpas. And I remember thinking, whoa, it will be downtown in 15 or 20 years. And so will this. This will become a major center of both residential use and commercial use. And so we need to acknowledge that and shoulder that responsibility as much as we can. And I would ask the applicants to recognize where we're trying to go with it in any way they can help. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell. We'll now hear from Commissioner Bauke.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Carmen, I got one more exhibit. Carmen? Yeah, let's just start with that one. I'm going to use some graphics here. And this is a drawing that comes from the Upper State Street Traffic and Circulation Study, and this is something I presented when we discussed the Bases project. In the fact that we don't have a specific plan, we need to at least establish a framework of circulation that breaks the mall down into blocks. The drawing that you have there, the red lines are the ones I draw on, the white ones were what the city proposed. Why we're not using that as a starting point for the discussion of this framework that's part of this to meet the policies in the land use element is beyond for me. So let's go to the next. We have adopted the large site standards in the objective design standards, which is tailored for projects just like this. And it even has a specific set of standards, especially if you get over 4.5 acres, a whole design process. It basically looks at these projects holistically. If you could turn to the next page, because I think I want to highlight the next page, slide over one. There is just basic planning principles that we're just ignoring for this site, which is the creation of blocks. The objective design standards has a minimum standard of a block perimeter of 1,800 feet. This particular site is significantly larger than 1,800 feet, and that's the reason why you see these buildings that are just seam, and the Architectural Review Board was wrestling with it. They're just massive because they're not broken up by any kind of circulation network, maybe paseos or anything. They're just very, very large buildings, which is, as Mr. I forgot the member's name, but one of the committee members, was just, it's just not Santa Barbara. And I completely agree. It's architecturally the style of Santa Barbara, but the massing of this thing is something that you'd see in West LA or Costa Mesa or Orange County. So we need to really seriously consider breaking this building up into smaller pieces. You go to the next page and center on that. The process of how we deal with sites like this is clearly illustrated in the objective design standards. You create the blocks, there's a circulation network, there's open space that goes with the blocks, and there's a 10% public park standard that's in your objective design standards. And then you get into the design sites themselves, and then the buildings, and then there are criteria for paseo. And one of the things I heard from the Architectural Review Board was a need for a lot more porosity, a lot more paseos and ways that people get from what, and they were talking about, well, I need to get from here to the common area. You have to go through this hallway, down that hallway, across this courtyard, down in that. it's just like a big giant, it might be like the Hotel Coronado or something. It's in that kind of scale. So I think we need to tell the applicant that at a minimum, they should break this thing into a couple parts. It will help architecturally, it will help the circulation network, and if you can go to the drawing, because so we do have standards that we can use. The 11 by 7, no, the 11 by 17 that's at the back. That one, fold it out, please. In a very quick overlay, you have here just dividing it by a 60-foot right-of-way, which could be a paseo or a street, brings it into compliance with our basic standards. So I would urge this commission to tell the Architectural Review Board that this is one way that would create a network. We could tie this network together. In long term, we will much be better off because we're going to have a whole lot of density here. I would definitely support even higher densities on this site. We're it's sort of interesting. We're throttling this thing, trying to stay within the zoning. This is a great site for more units and smaller units and using the density bonus because we're not getting much more than we would get from a density bonus. Right? We should be doing a much more intensive project here, but one that would work with a circulation network. So those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Bauke. I will now hear from Vice Chair Boss.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments in addition to all the comments that have already been stated. I think this will be a real visual improvement to the area. It's pretty depressing right now as it is and has been for quite a few years. So I'm looking forward to housing being developed here, but really wish that the applicant would consider additional affordable housing units, especially because this is a site where it would be best to take advantage of the space that we have and increase the number of affordable units, so moderate and also consider low-income units. So.
All right. Thank you to the applicant for this presentation and for addressing all of our questions. I really echo a lot of the comments that have been made by my fellow commissioners, but first I'll start with the design. I do really appreciate the design. I like the Spanish colonial. I think that you've done a lot of work to ensure that this is going to be a really positive kind of new benefit to the community in terms of just visually. I appreciate the attention to ensuring that, on the freeway, that when you're driving by, that this is also still visually positive. I really like the archways. I think the ABR may have said something different, but I really liked that. I like the wrap building with the ability for the parking to go level to level of where your residence is. I appreciate the work that has been done to address open space in terms of, creating different recreational spaces and the pool and all of that. The photos and everything that you guys have provided are really beautiful. I do agree with some of my fellow commissioners' questions earlier just regarding, there is a need for more public-facing open space in this area, but I understand your perspective of, keeping this just to internal guests. I would ask that you guys consider a playground or something that's really kid-focused, given that there seems to be a lot of amenities that are towards more of the adult crowd or, it's probably important to ensure that given that there's a lack of space for children and kind of play areas outside right now in this area, that would be something that would be prioritized. I really like the landscaping. I like the minimalist design style. I think that that's aligned with Santa Barbara, but also kind of look towards the future. I also like all of the kind of nooks in different areas. I know that you're not going to have like workspaces traditionally, but given that a lot of people work from home, I think having different variety is important. Regarding just overall improvements, I agree, again, I don't want to repeat everything that everyone has said. So, ensuring that the deed restrictions are spread out is important. Appreciate Barnwell's comments on the connectivity to the broader area. I do think that there's a number of, different shopping areas and things that we should be taking into account outside of just the multi-use pathway that I do appreciate that that's happening, but I think there's other opportunities to explore as well. Obviously, Commissioner Bauke has made some significant comments around just connectivity in general. I will defer to the broader commission on kind of the summary on this. I know that we're going to be providing comprehensive comments that will be done by kind of a vote of the commission. I also agree, ABR made a comment about the the towers and how to look towards what the Santa Barbara Courthouse looks like. I think doing a little bit more work around that would be great. And then definitely agree with Commissioner Wiscombe regarding ensuring that we're really coordinating with Macy's, because this is going to be a significant change for this area. I think everyone is hopeful that this is really positive and that is a significant, benefit to the public in general, but also visually. But obviously, it all needs to flow and work together. So I encourage you all to continue to work with the Macy's or group that's, doing their project, because I think that's important. In terms of consistency with the general plan, we have this conversation a lot. I think it's consistent with general plan in many of the aspects, like the land use element and things like that. I'm very disappointed that I think that this is yet again another opportunity where this is a project that's delivering over 400 units. It's an opportunity that we could get significant affordability, but because the requirement is only 10%, that seems to be what you all are going to propose. I respectfully urge you and ask to consider increasing the level of affordability, especially to the point that this is only moderate affordability. I think if the applicant team would consider other levels of income to be, allocated an additional 5%, that would be meaningful to the community. Obviously, the city is contemplating and currently doing a nexus study that would evaluate the inclusionary requirement. And if that were to be in place today, I would expect that the applicant team would be able to make 15% pencil out, or 20%, or whatever it is, just like in every other community that has higher inclusionary requirements. So I really ask that you consider that, given the housing crisis that we are in, and given that this is such a big opportunity because the number of units is so high. So that is what I have to say on that topic, and I appreciate everyone's time and efforts around this overall discussion. This has been robust. So with that, that's the end of my comments. I know that the motion on this will be a little, I'm going to defer to Vice Chair Bosses. I think she's been taking copious notes of everybody's comments. We will try to summarize those, and then we will go from there.
Madam Chair, may I make one more comment?
Sure.
Ms. Carmen, would you be so kind as to put this on the overhead screen? I forgot to include this, but I wanted to, because if everyone in the room is like I am, even though I do this for a living for 50 years, sometimes it's difficult to know how big something is. Okay, good. So here's our bigger picture. If you imagine that this blue dot is Carrillo Street downtown, then this is Figueroa, this is Anacapa, this is Victoria, and that is Sola. And here is the Arlington Theater, and here is the Granada Theater. All of this distance right here that we're talking about, to tie back in with what Commissioner Balke said, requires that we spend a lot more time figuring out how you're going to get from here to there. Because the visual of our downtown corridor and how that works, I think needs to be in our mind when we're developing the traffic flow and the pedestrian flow here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, can I get a motion or an attempt at a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to attempt to summarize the comments that we have expressed. We were asked to comment on the design, overall improvements, and general plan consistency. There were two comments that I think most of the commissioners made that didn't fall necessarily into those. So one, that a specific plan would have been helpful, and encourage coordination efforts with Macy's. Under design, the comments were, it's difficult to comment because it is still very conceptual and it does not show context, meaning other buildings in the area. The wrapped building type hardscaping is a potential concern, but the design is interesting and makes good use of space. There's a request for a community room in the amenity building. The open space courtyards, pathways, pool, and multi-use trail are appreciated, but need more public open space or public connectivity. Appreciate units opening to the courtyard rather than the freeway. Need a dedicated play area. Encourage architectural style variations and explore moving massing to the center, potentially away from the Calle Real La Cumbre corner. Include a section view at La Cumbre, Calle Real, and the 101. And note this will be a visual improvement to the area. appreciation for the landscaping and the areas for people to work outside. Comment about the towers to make them more similar to the Santa Barbara Courthouse Tower. Overall improvements, most ABR comments have been addressed, but need to adjust the massing and porosity and access. In terms of consistency with the city's general plan, under land use element, the large site standards, planning principles, specifically creation of blocks, need to be incorporated, break up the building into smaller pieces. Under the housing element, intersperse deed restricted units throughout all buildings and do not cluster. Concerns about HE2 impacts, specifically impacts on schools. Disappointment in the low amount of affordability or affordable units, and a note that they're only moderate, and a request for the applicant to consider low income and additional affordable units to avoid losing out on the opportunity. Under environmental resources and conservation element, there are some concerns about the environmental review, creek impacts and restoration, and there were a few specific numbers. So energy 5.1 to make sure you're building consistent with green energy, ER 6.6 solar, and CDF 2.4 permeable and pervious surfaces. Under the circulation element, concerns about timing and impacts of both projects, the Macy's project and the Sears project, and environmental review context. 13.1, incorporate goals of the circulation element. That'll be very important on this site and in this area. A request for the access near the creek to be a road, not a driveway. And a note to the city, general access and circulation could be improved in the area, especially to incorporate or increase connectivity with Gardens on Hope, the movie theater, and other spaces in the area. Consider access displayed by Commissioner Bauke to break up the buildings and need more connectivity to the broader area. And finally, under the open space element, request for a dog or animal area, again, for the play area, and appreciate the lawn space. Did I capture all of the comments?
Can I second that? That was wonderful.
That was really, great job, Lucille.
That was amazing.
Vice Chair Boss.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a second. Any comments on the motion? No? Good? Okay. Ms. Carmen, can we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Wardlow. I will begin with Commissioner Barnwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauke,
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio,
Yes.
Vice Chair Boss,
Yes.
and Chair Wardlow.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
That was a great summary of the motion, Vice Chair Boss, so good job. All right, and thank you again to the applicant. We appreciate your time. And thank you, staff, for all of your efforts on this. All right, we will now move on to item 4 of the agenda, the administration portion of our agenda. Okay. All right, we'll start with committee and liaison reports. Do we have a staff hearing officer liaison report or any other
I
committee
do.
reports?
Yeah.
You want to,
Yeah.
your thing?
Should I go here?
Commissioner DeLuccio.
Thank you. I'll be real brief. There was a staff hearing officer meeting yesterday, and they approved modifications for 3 design review projects. One was 1260 Mountain View Drive. That's near the Macers, coming off Carrillo Street. 3215 Campanello Drive, that's the Mason neighborhood, and 2200 Carlton Way in the Mason neighborhood. Again, these were just all approval of minor modifications. On the Carlton Way one, however, they also approved a coastal development permit, and all these projects are appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 days of calendar days of yesterday.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. Do we have any other liaison reports? All right. Thank you all very much for your time. It's coming? No. That concludes our April 3rd, 2025. It's now 4:26. That concludes our April 3rd, 2025 Planning Commission hearing. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, April 17th, as this upcoming week has been canceled. So thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful day.